All right, everybody. How are we doing? My name is Mike Crispy, and it's my great honor to be moderating this incredible discussion today, the Weaponization Watch Panel, hosted by the great Cynthia Hughes. Round of applause for Cynthia. Started after that fateful day on January 6th when we saw the true horrors of what our own government is capable of. People tell you this is the freest and most fair system in the world, but unfortunately we've seen over the last couple of years true evil rear its ugly head. And in the face of true evil, who's fighting that, who's standing up to it, who's punching back, who's making a difference? It's not a lot of people, unfortunately. So many people during these last couple of years ran for cover, they hid and they did not step up when we needed them the most. It is so egregiously apparent when we look at politicians, representatives, leaders. They say they fight for us, and when we need them the most, they were nowhere to be found because they didn't want to touch a topic like January 6th. It's very tragic and it's terrible. But thank God that Patriot Freedom Project was around, and thank God that so many people in this room worked together to work with the president, work with people in the administration, and ultimately, successfully get our January 6th prisoners free. Let's have a round of applause for them. Of course, as we see it now, the fight continues. This weaponized standard that they've created is only increasing. Now that they've opened up the Pandora's box and we see what they're capable of, they're not going to stop. We see what the left wing is capable of. We see what, even in some cases, bad Republicans are capable of. And we need to have a check on that. We need to have a balance on that. And we need to fight the weaponization of government so we can truly all ourselves be afforded the liberties that are instilled on us under the Constitution, to have a fair process, to have true freedom, to have a true justice system, and not have it be weaponized like we see in third world countries in cruel and unusual ways. We know that certain people in our government want to turn this country into a, look-alike of these foreign oligarchs and third world hellscapes. But we're not going to let that happen. And groups like ours, groups like what Cynthia is leading, are the absolute forefront of the defense of that, to making sure that we keep our country intact. And without a justice system that is fair and honest and right, we don't have a country. So that's why it's so important that we support the great work of so many people in this room. So now, without further ado, I want to welcome up Cynthia Hughes.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. Normally I have my notes. This time I have them in my phone. And I'm just gonna read what I wrote because I always get just messed up and I go off topic, and Marcus won't let me do that this time. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Weaponization Watch discussion panel. And I thank you for joining us today for this important conversation. So I have a question for all of you. And that question is, what brings us here today together? And my answer is simple: frustration, fatigue, and unrelenting fight for freedom. For me, the fight first began with a phone call that I will never forget. The call telling me that my nephew had been arrested for attending a protest at the People's House on January 6th. He was 100% peaceful, and he committed no violence that day. He assaulted no one that day. And yet he was denied due process, denied bond 3 times, and held in solitary confinement for more than 1 year of his life. That's a fact. Tim had no criminal history. He proudly served his country for 12 years in the United States Army. And yet before a single charge was adjudicated, he was stripped of his career, his freedom, and his dignity. How could our government do that to an American citizen? I wish I could tell you that Tim's story is rare, but in the last 5 years, I've learned a devastating truth, and it's not rare. What I've witnessed is the full force of a weaponized government, a system that now too often punishes citizens instead of protecting them, a system where prosecutors chase headlines instead of justice, and where judges abandon the objectivity for ideology. Right here in the Eastern District of New York, we have watched case after case that should have never been brought. Biased judges, overzealous prosecutors, and a district attorney who has made it her life's mission to not serve the people of New York, but to target President Trump, and in doing so, persecute anyone who dares to oppose her agenda. Right now, there's 2 women sitting in a prison here in Brooklyn. Not because of clear evidence, not because of any violent crime, but because a judge appears offended by their beliefs. Nicole Daydoni and Rachel Cherwitz are being swallowed by a system that in their case no longer reflects the rule of law or the presumption of innocence it is supposed to protect. Their continued incarceration sends a chilling message to every American that punishment can be driven by ideology rather than justice. What is happening to these women is not just a personal tragedy, it is a warning sign of a system drifting dangerously far from its constitutional foundations. My dear friend Doug Mackey was prosecuted for sharing a meme. A decorated NYPD officer here with us today saw his life and his family destroyed over lies. A young man also here with us today was targeted for investing in cryptocurrency, a market the Biden administration openly opposed. But what do all of these cases have in common? Conspiracy. Conspiracy has become the government's weapon of choice when they lack real evidence. It is vague and it is dangerous, and it has the power to completely destroy a person's life. Just ask my friend Enrique, who you'll hear from today. He was sentenced to more than 20 years in prison over January 6th. And here's the part that many people don't really know to this day, and should shock every American. Enrique wasn't even at the Capitol on January 6th. Not there, yet convicted on words, assumptions, and ideology, and sentenced to 22 years by a prosecutor and a judge who abandoned justice. That is not American. When January 6th happened, I founded the Patriot Freedom Project because families had nowhere to turn, and we raised money to hire attorneys. We helped secure real legal defense for hundreds of January 6th defendants when the entire system had turned against them. Didn't we, Nick? But we cannot stop there. The mission now continues through Weaponization Watch. Because today, and any American who speaks up, thinks freely, pushes back, questions authority, or refuses to comply with an ideology that goes against the grain, demands, I don't know what I wrote here, can find themselves in a courtroom or worse, in a prison cell. Just ask my friend Terry, who was here today with us. Her son Scott sits in a prison in Colorado because a judge refused to allow discovery that would almost certainly exonerate her son. This is why Weaponization Watch exists. It exists to expose these cases, to amplify these victims, to fight for clemency, justice, and reform, and to make sure no American ever feels alone in the system again. With the support of patriots like you and people beyond this room, your donations and your voices and your willingness to stand up, we can help victims like Nicole and Rachel. We can help Scott, and we can help the countless others whose names you will hear today. So I urge you please to stand with us, support this mission, fight alongside of us, because justice in America should never be political, and freedom should never, ever be an option. Thank you. So I usually, I always go off script, and we're on a strict timeline today, and I will get in a lot of trouble if I don't stick to that. So, and I'll be coming up more to talk more to you, and of course you could talk to me afterwards, and you can reach me through social media. I'm happy to give my phone number, my email. It's very important that we get people to really support this mission and share what we're doing. Today I had the opportunity to go on to Steve Bannon's show, and we have already gotten some really good feedback on that. And weaponization of government is a very serious thing that a lot of people don't realize in this country. And it's very, very important that we combat it and we fight it. President Trump is the only person that is standing between us and serious tyranny. And a lot of people, again, they don't realize that either. We have two systems of justice essentially in this country. And when our panel gets started, you're going to hear a lot more about that. And you're going to hear from, from these brave lawyers that go to the front lines and they fight and they defend, people when it's not the popular thing to do. There's a lot of thank yous to give out, and I'm gonna do that at the end of our show. And I would just like to say I really appreciate everybody coming together today and coming out to hear what we have to say. It's so important, and I really urge you when you leave here today that you take what you learned here, and you tell your family, your friends, your coworkers, you go to church, you tell them at church, and you tell the person at the bus stop. Because Weaponization Watch is very, very needed. There's nothing in this country at all that is helping people that are languishing behind bars. I can't stress it enough. There are 2 women that are sitting in a Brooklyn jail right now for a conspiracy charge. Conspiracy is so dangerous, and you're going to hear from Tom Caniff, our attorney, Nick Smith, our attorney, the great John Laura, who is President Trump's attorney. They're going to tell you just how dangerous conspiracy is. And when a prosecutor or an investigating team doesn't have clear evidence, that's what they use. And it obliterates people, and it's a shame. And you have these women that are facing a long time in prison, and we can't have that. We can't have that. You have a young man in this room right now who's not even 30 years old, and he's facing a long time in prison because people don't like serious, they don't like certain markets, certain things. Well, let me just not go off the rails here. But we're going to get started with our panel. But before we do, I would like to invite up my partners, if you will, who have teamed up with me and are working with me and helping me to kick off Weaponization Watch. One has been his own victim of weaponization. He has been a target, and he's going to share his story. And the other is the son of a very, very powerful woman, a pioneer, Phyllis Schlafly. If you don't know who she is, you should certainly look her up and you learn about her, because she set us all on this course. She is the reason that we have Moms for America and Moms for Liberty and all of these conservative organizations. So with that, I'd like to invite up John Schlafly and Doug Mackey.
As Cynthia said, my mother, Phyllis Schlafly, was instrumental in national politics, and she was very instrumental in helping President Trump get the Republican nomination in 2016. And when she passed away later that year, candidate Trump brought his entire team, including Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, and his wife Melania, aboard Trump Force One to St. Louis to honor my mother at her funeral. Her successor in our organization was Ed Martin. Maybe you've heard of Ed. Ed messaged me this morning with a new project he's working on that he said this is a close hold though, so I'm not allowed to tell you about it. But there's more in the works. He keeps telling me, just be patient. And although Ed is in the Justice Department, as you know, and he's struggling with the bureaucracy there, but he's trying every day to push back against weaponization and to get the pardons that need to be done out. So I'm so happy to partner with Cynthia, Edna Cynthia, 3 years ago, and formed an alliance between our two organizations, and that has continued this year, since now that Ed is in the Justice Department. And the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles Organization and Patriot Freedom Project are co-sponsoring this event. By the way, it's great to be at this wonderful location where they still honor a great president, Theodore Roosevelt, with a statue. Especially since the big statue of the big Roosevelt sculpture was removed from the front of the Museum of Natural History on the Upper West Side. What an outrage that was. But at least there's a pocket here in New York for Theodore Roosevelt republicanism. I'm so happy to be here for the first time. Cynthia?
John has become a great mentor and teacher, and I'm very grateful for you, John. Thank you. Doug?
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, John. It's an honor to be here with Cynthia of Patriot Freedom, and of course, John Schlafly of the Schlafly Eagles. These two have been incredible warriors for justice and also the conservative movement. So my name is Doug Mackey. 2 days after Joe Biden was inaugurated, I was arrested and charged after sending a memes telling Hillary Clinton supporters that they could text their vote. I'll talk about it later today, but ultimately we fought them all the way. We never entertained the idea of a plea deal. I was convicted. We never entertained the idea of even a pardon. We fought the case in the court and won this past July. So that was a big. So as during the 2016 election, I was sitting here in Manhattan, not too far from here, just a few blocks away, posted a meme that I thought was funny, and then I moved to Florida. I was living my life. I was brought back here to the EDNY to fight the case, so it's very fitting that we're here in New York today. There's a big problem with these two offices in New York, the EDNY and the SDNY, and there are a number of victims of lawfare and weaponization in both of these courts. A number of EDNY defendants, we're like a fraternity now, we see each other all the time. What people don't understand, President Trump's been in office for almost 1 year. There are a number of weaponized cases still going through the system, people in prison, people fighting on appeal, people fighting for pardons, people who have served their sentences, people who have not served their sentences. So let's think about these cases as we're here today. And I also want to have us think about, yes, it's important that we think about long-term structural reform of the justice system, but in the immediate future here, short-term, we need to think about real tactics and strategies. And to that end, Cynthia had the brilliant idea of creating the Weaponization Watch. It's a privilege to be a part of this project. So we're going to try to be allies for people who are fighting lawfare and weaponization, and allies to the administration as well, because as we know, just because a few appointees go into the DOJ doesn't mean you get everything that you want immediately. There are tens of thousands of DOJ employees and only a few dozen appointees. So with that being said, thank you very much, Cynthia and John, and let's start the panels.
While we're waiting for the panel to get set up here, I just want to give out another quick acknowledgement of another example of weaponization, and that is Dr. Ron Elfenbahn. I butcher the names all the time. And you're going to hear from Dr. Ron a little bit later today. The weaponization of government runs very, very deep, and it runs deep on all forms. And I really take videos, listen carefully, because you're going to learn really quickly just how deep it runs. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're all good, we're all set? We're mic'd up? I like it. All right, just want to welcome everybody one more time, and obviously Cynthia Hughes doing amazing work, and just one more round of applause for Cynthia doing such a great job. Cynthia doesn't like when I hype her up like that, so that's why we do it. But so do you want to shift your focus now to our first panel that we're going to have today, talking about mass clemency. And we have our panelists here. We have Nick Smith. Nick, all right, round of applause for him. We have Colonel Rob Manus. There you go, Colonel Rob Manus. Mike McMahon. There you go. And the aforementioned Douglas Mackey. There you go. So we're going to get started here with a 5-minute opening statement from each panelist, and then we're going to talk about, a review of cases that Weaponization Watch is profiling and what a mass clemency project would look like. So let's do the opening statements down in this order.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Cynthia for inviting me to tell my story about how the FBI ruined my career and my life. 2020, October 2020, the FBI surrounded my house, local police. Couldn't believe what was going on. Thought my kids were involved in an accident. Thought maybe somebody was hurt, injured. didn't want to open the door at first, but I finally opened it up and they said, Mike, you're under arrest. And I said, for what? They said, working for China. I said, working for China? I said, all right. I said, I had a great NYPD career, I made tons of arrests, followed the law, never been arrested, couldn't believe it. They said, oh, we'll take you downtown, we'll talk to you more in person, which I did. I couldn't believe when they gave me the complaint and I read it, I couldn't believe what was in the complaint report. It said I stalked somebody, I harassed a New Jersey family, I witnessed meetings or videotape meetings at a mall in New Jersey, none of which took place. None of it took place. And I told the officers and the agents, listen, you got the wrong guy. I wasn't there. It's not me. It's not me. They set my bail at $500,000. I had to put it at my house. I put it at my brother's house. But I said, to my wife, I said, we got to fight this. We cannot let this happen. We had nothing to do with this Chinese operation, the CCP operation. You got the wrong guy. Said it over and over and over again. The agent would not speak to me, would not meet with me, did not interview me. I never met the case agent from the FBI. And I said, I want to meet with him. Through my lawyer, he would never want to meet with us. I wouldn't take a plea. I said, we're fighting this the whole way. If it costs us our house, we're going to deal with it, we're going to fight it. We go to trial. All this stuff comes out at trial that we had no idea existed. We weren't privileged to some of the discovery. We weren't allowed to look at some of the discovery. A lot of the discovery was encrypted. Why couldn't I look at my discovery? Why am I finding out at trial that this stuff was in my discovery? Completely shocked, upset, just couldn't believe I was in this situation. We fight it, go to a 6-week trial. I was found guilty. I was sentenced to 18 months in a federal prison. I was sent to Michigan, a low security prison in Michigan. Through some letters of support, I was sentenced later, after 3 months, I was sentenced to a halfway house in Newark, New Jersey. While I was in Newark, New Jersey at the halfway house, I got a call from Congressman Mike Lawler saying I was pardoned by the President of the United States. Thank you. I thought I was going to see the tree lighting in Rockefeller Center. I didn't know it was coming here today. So, thanks to my wife, Martha, who's been amazing. Fought for me every single day the last 5 years. So could not have made it through this without you.
She's the best.
She's the best.
She's the best girl.
All right, thanks for sharing that. All right, go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Mike. So, so we're here talking about mass clemency, and I think it's important we talk about this because I've seen in the media lately, President Trump is taking a lot of heat from the media, from the DOJ. As you know, they all leak about some of his pardons, and so I just want to talk about these pardons from the perspective of my case. You can't believe everything that you hear and see in the media. I know this from the surprise to hear that. But let me just talk about my case. I posted a meme that said that Hillary Clinton supporters could text their vote. During the 2016 cycle, it was obviously a satire, it was a joke. The DOJ didn't treat it as a joke. Hillary Clinton did not treat it as a joke. Surprise. So basically, so you post a meme online. Okay, what kind of charge can they hit you with federally? So they charged me under the Klan Act of 1871, a felony, punishable by up to 10 years in federal prison, or death if you were part of a conspiracy that resulted in death, you can get the death penalty. So how did they come up with this? It's a conspiracy to injure, intimidate, threaten, or oppress anyone in the use of their rights. So you think that would be like, well, masked men beating people up or killing them for going to the polls or speaking out using their First Amendment, whatever else. This was an entirely novel prosecution. They had never prosecuted a case like this where somebody just posted something online. But this was written about in white papers before Biden even got into office. So this is the whole NGO complex that we all know about, concocting ways that they can charge people. There was not a single victim, and they didn't have any. So with a conspiracy, they don't need any victims. First of all they need is that you had an agreement with somebody else to enact this, whatever crime it is, the underlying crime. Well, in my case, there's not even an underlying crime, because posting a meme that's joking about the way you can vote is not actually a crime, but that doesn't matter. They can say, as long as you conspire with somebody else to injure someone in their attempt to vote. They needed a co-conspirator, otherwise you can't charge with a crime. So they found some guy that I never talked to, who happened to be in some of the DM groups with me, that had either reposted or shared the same meme. They went in through DMs, and they subpoenaed Twitter, went through all these DMs, and pick out little bits and pieces where other people are saying things like, oh, haha, people are, it'll be so funny, people will believe this. Having nothing to do with me. So this is how they weaponize these statutes. Ultimately, I posted this tweet, nobody really saw it until some people in the media picked this up and started spreading it around, saying, oh, look what we found. Ultimately, 4,900 people texted the number. So what was the headline in the New York Times? 4,900 Democrats tricked. I kid you not. And of course, we went to trial. There wasn't a single person that was tricked. They interviewed people. They went around Brooklyn, Long Island, wherever, interviewing people who texted the number, and people were like, I don't even remember texting this, or of course, I didn't think it was real, whatever else. So I was charged with this crime in 2021. President Trump, 2 years later, was charged under the same exact statute. We're talking about novel interpretations of statutes. So obviously, ultimately, we won the case because they said the appellate court looked at all the evidence and they said there's no way that I agreed with anybody else that this meme was going to trick a bunch of people out of voting. So basically, what they had done was they twisted this other guy's arm and got him to testify, and he lied during the testimony. He later on recanted the testimony. So my point in saying all this is that I think that we need to stand behind President Trump and his pardons. And I know some people look at some of them and say, what's going on here? Well, there's a lot behind these cases that you don't hear about. I mean, I could talk about my case for hours and hours, and I could forget half of it and remember it later. And I could write a whole book about it. So, there's also, I think, some individuals who may be guilty and may plead guilty. Maybe some plead guilty because they're guilty. Some might plead guilty because it's a better deal, even though they're not guilty. But they're hit with these extremely unfair sentences because of who they are, because of their politics or their beliefs or what have you. For instance, Roger Stone pled guilty or I think he was convicted, and the DOJ tried to recommend a 9-year prison sentence until I think Bill Barr had to intervene and say, no, you have to redo this recommendation. So that's just one example. Another example, George Santos, who was hit with 7 years, and there's a whole list of these cases. So I think we need to stand behind President Trump, and somebody has to make the case for why this is a necessary thing.
Good. All right. Thank you, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a defense lawyer. I've worked with Cynthia Hughes and her organization and exasperated her for 5 years, approximately.
Don't throw punches today.
So pardons and commutations have become a subject of widely
Shift that mic over to the middle.
There's a lot of
one that's sitting in front
about recent pardons and commutations that have come out. And much of this is unfair. One of the criticisms is that these pardons that the White House has been issuing recently would never come from any other administration. We can get into the details about why that's wrong, but I think the key point here is it's sparking a debate about how pardons should be used, and this debate is a useful one. On the one hand, you have outlets like National Review. Today, they published an editorial saying that this White House's pardons are an argument for eliminating the president's pardon power. They say that Congress should put curbs on the president's pardon power. I think that's exactly the opposite. I think the pardons that are coming out of this White House are defensible on their own terms, but even more broadly, I think given the failures of the criminal justice system over time and Congress's inaction, the pardon power should be expanded. And not just in terms of the number of individuals that receive them, but the concept, the structure of using pardons. Pardons can be done categorically in addition to individually. So there are all kinds of vague federal statutes, like the type Doug is talking about, like in the case of Mike McMahon, that are abused by prosecutors, and people in the system know about this. They've known about it for a long time, and nothing is done about it because legislation is a snail crawl process. What the White House could do is it could start using pardons to basically rewrite some of these laws itself. And how would that work? They could start writing pardons that address certain uses of statutes. And they say to federal prosecutors, well, if you go after people using this vague interpretation, you'll get nowhere because they're already pardoned. Another power the president has is to issue conditional pardons. Most pardons come through unconditionally, but the president can use this power to say, for example, well, I will pardon you on the condition that you pay a lower penalty than the one the federal prosecutor, the federal judge imposed. Serve a lesser sentence. And so there are all of this suite of powers that the president has that could totally rework the way criminal justice works. And I think that is very much worth exploring, particularly in this White House, given its boldness.
All right, very good. Thanks, Colonel Manus.
Thanks, Mike. First of all, I want to thank Cynthia, John, and Patriot Freedom Project, Eagle Forum, for sponsoring and establishing Weaponization Watch and Veterans Leadership Fund that I chair. Is proud to help support that, and thank you for the invitation to bring the military side of this weaponization that's happened to the American people by not only our government, but all of our institutions across the board, that each person in this room probably once trusted implicitly. The big highlighted issue right now on the military side is the COVID-19 vaccine order that was issued by President Biden and followed through by then Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, but it turned out to be unlawful. And that's a big subject today because there's still an attempt and continued attempts to weaponize the department, what is now the Department of War, against not only our military members, but the American people itself. I'm sure all of you have heard of the seditious six that are calling for disobeying orders that are lawful in the United States Armed Forces today. That is just another version of what we saw with the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The reason why I'm very happy to be here today is that the current president and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth have issued orders to reinstate somewhere between 85,000 and 100,000 young Americans that were either court-martialed or separated from the service involuntarily or forced to leave because of this unlawful vaccine order that occurred. As a matter of fact, they have had some limited success. Captain Mark Shaw, who was a U.S. Army officer, the one officer that was court-martialed and convicted, in my opinion, was pardoned by the president and has come back to the service and was recently promoted to the rank that he should be holding today. So that's good news. The bad news is the bureaucrats that are in the Pentagon and the service departments continue to resist that order and continue this weaponization. How are they doing that? They chose a bureaucratic process called Board of Correction of Military Records to bring people back in. That's why, even though the initial order was issued in February of this year, less than 100 individuals have been reinstated to active service. And these are individuals that chose to do the right thing and stand up and be counted when it was very, very difficult to do that. That's why they're mostly still in place today, because the institution forced them to leave in one way or the other. But we want to see them all back in because of their talent to make decisions under pressure that are the right decisions. That's what we need in the United States. And the reason that is important is that less than 100, come on, ladies and gentlemen, when we have almost 100,000 people by a lot of estimates that need to be back on active duty so they can be fulfilling the orders of the President of the United States in the national security space, not only here domestically, but overseas too, in a lawful way, we need them. So what do we need to do? An organization that I've worked with for many years called Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services, or STARS, has sent a letter to the President's office and to the President himself back in June, asking for blanket pardons for all of the individuals harmed by this unlawful order so that they can bypass this bureaucratic system that's being used against Secretary Hegseth and President Trump's order and preventing people from coming in, and allow them to all be reinstated en masse. And that's an unusual move, but we have asked for that. We've also sent copies of the letter to the Pardon Office and the Department of Justice to see if we can make some headway there. But we would certainly appreciate everybody's support here to reach out and contact your representatives and help share this show, this event here, so that we can continue to get that word out, because most Americans don't realize just how bad the weaponization of the Department of War has been, not only against our military members, but against U.S. citizens too.
So I do want to ask, because I know we were talking a little bit about it, and that was a good segue, Colonel Manus, is I think the number one question on many people's minds is how can we scale up the process to review these pardon applications? What should be the criteria? Because obviously, you know, when these things are hanging in the balance after 4 years of just absolute chaos and anarchy under the Biden regime, there's so much to clean up. So how could we, you know, just going to throw this out to the group, whoever wants to talk first, how can we scale up this process to review it? And there are so many people who, you know, I guess they haven't gotten their day yet to get the thing reviewed, and everyone has a story. How can we scale this up? How can we make it happen faster? How can we get this done within the 3 years that we have for sure left with this administration and the friends that we have, you know, in it and around it and advocating for it? So whoever wants to go ahead. Okay.
For me, it was a fairly simple process. I think it was only a couple pages, filled it out, sent it in. Thought it was a more complicated case than that. A few pages, called the right people, and, you know, got it over.
I think there's a big role for outside organizations and charities like Weaponization Watch to do some of the vetting work that the small pardon attorney's office can't handle at this scale. And I just think these groups does incredible work. I think anything she might do more vetting than some, you know, the pardon attorney's office might have done. So more resources to groups like Weaponization Watch that are taking a deep dive into cases.
Just to add to that, one of the techniques that the Secretary of War's office has done is set up a task force on this reinstatement issue, but it's being led by a colonel that was forced out of the military and is one of the less than 100 that's been able to get back in. However, I also think that the President could establish a commission made up of outside agencies and decision makers that have this type of experience and have been working in this space for a long time to help the small pardon office, because it needs folks that have been through the process, have been advocating in the process, and they've been harmed by the process, most importantly, to be involved in that. So I would like to see an outside commission established in order to do that. That covers all the pardon issues across the board, including the ones I was talking about with the
The Colonel's idea fits well with another reform issue with respect to pardons, which is that the pardon attorney's office has been known for a long time to be Mr. No for pardons. They're a branch of the Department of Justice, which is to some extent captured by prosecutors. So outside commissions and private organizations will help stop that kind of influence as well.
Absolutely, and also we have to be providing, well, first of all, I agree, there should absolutely be an outside commission that can recommend pardons to both the DOJ and the White House. We have to make inroads to both. I know sometimes President Trump will go around the system and issue pardons without the input of DOJ, which I think is a good thing. I think that accelerating the process is absolutely necessary. Traditionally, you have to wait 5 years after you serve your sentence to ask for a pardon before they will even consider it. So I think that, you know, if that's somebody that committed a crime and was guilty, and they say, well, you know, I've reformed my life, I'm ready to go on, that's great. But obviously, a lot of these cases, we're arguing are cases of weaponization and lawfare. But the president definitely needs outside support as far as political cover fire here, or else, you know, he's not going to be able to get anything done. Like you said, national review is going out there and saying, you know, the president shouldn't even be allowed to have the pardon power, which is just another case where the establishment really has been chipping away at the power of the president for all these years. I mean, the president, in a lot of ways, can do whatever he wants. He doesn't need the DOJ to recommend a pardon. He doesn't have to wait 5 years to pardon anybody. And he's been exercising that power, so we're very fortunate, and we should keep in mind that without President Trump, none of this would be happening at all. We wouldn't even be sitting here talking about it, so we're very fortunate. So we have to provide political cover, and it's not just about, oh, you know, I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's not just about, oh, you know, politically this is popular or whatever else. It's the right thing to do, so we have to make that case in the media.
Sorry, to dovetail on your point, Doug, and Nick, you too. Biden pardoned murderers in the last 10 minutes of his presidency, murderers. And that they're calling out Trump for pardoning people who didn't do anything wrong. It's just mind-boggling. Like,
The oil pen that
yeah. I mean, drug dealers, murderers, people who were like real criminals, they were pardoned in the last 5 minutes of the Biden presidency, and yet they're coming after President Trump for pardoning people who don't deserve to be in jail.
Biden was effectively using the pardon power to get rid of the death penalty. And although you might not always agree with that policy, it's an interesting use of the pardon power. So Biden and before him, President Obama were conceiving of this power to categorically deal with problems of justice rather than whack-a-mole with individual defendants. And I might not personally agree with how they went about that or what sorts of crimes they were using to provide relief funds, but it's a very interesting approach that I think would behoove this White House to look at.
I would say that it's not just the right thing to do for the individuals involved in with the pardon requests and those kind of things. It's the important thing to do for the future. Today, as I speak to you, this unlawful vaccine order that was issued is now being used the same exact process to eliminate service members that are not desiring to take the flu shot, and they're making religious accommodation and medical accommodation requests. I know of at least 2 officers today, one in the Marine Corps and one in the United States Air Force, that are about to be separated from the service simply because they don't want to take the flu shot. And I was a commander 3 times, ladies and gentlemen. I have never, ever even reprimanded an individual for not desiring to take the flu shot. It's never been a readiness issue, but it's been made into one because of this unlawful vaccine order on the COVID disease that has gone through every layer of the bureaucracy, all the way down into the uniform unit levels at the lowest level possible, where it's ordered by NCOs and young officers, and they're using it as a hammer to get people out. And those people, as I mentioned before, are the individuals that the United States needs the most. They can make good, solid, independent, legal decisions in a stressful environment, and that's exactly what we need in the armed forces.
I'm a physician, and in order to step foot in a hospital, you have to prove you had a flu shot. So if you want your privileges to a hospital as a doctor, a nurse, a tech, you have to have had a flu shot and a COVID shot. To this day, they will not give you privileges. They will yank your privileges and throw you out of the hospital if you don't have one. It's crazy.
Let's go up.
What about a more effective use of preemptive pardons, right? I mean, you've seen them used, historically, it was Nixon, pardoned by Ford, right, preemptively against future charges, and then Biden did it recently. You see presidents use preemptive pardons at the end of their term. What about a more active utilization of that while we figure this all out and just kind of cut to the chase, right? I mean, I think that might be a good way to kind of, ward off kind of what we're talking about in terms of this, entire weaponization of the Justice Department and the judicial system is someone, work with President Trump to effectively use preemptive pardons. And again, I know they're not highly favored, but we kind of have no choice.
I think it's not just a useful idea, it's an essential idea if you're going to use pardons to reform the justice system. So the idea would be to lay down clear lines for prosecutors in advance with reactive or conditional pardons and competitions that you're not going to use these vague statutes in the way that you've done in the past. And if you do, it's pointless because the case is already over. The person is pardoned.
I think that's a great task for a presidential commission on pardons to help the Department of Justice Pardon Office.
There just needs to be an exodus of pardons in this country, seriously. There needs to be a commission set up where we're looking at, cases like, do you know how many Michael Manns are in this country? That we don't even hear about.
Exactly.
And there needs to be a, like we've been talking about, a commission set up that, people contact and say, my loved one, has been in prison for XYZ amount of years, or is facing prison, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name, your guy. How young he is, your guy. And God forbid, if things don't go well, he needs advocacy out here, and he needs somebody to really fight. And that's what we're gonna do, and that's what we've been doing. So, I just wanna say one thing, sorry, Marcus. I went to the doctor with my daughter the other day, okay? We walked in the office, now this was a GI doctor. And my daughter went up to the desk, and the mean woman behind the glass said, it's HMH policy to wear a mask. And so HMH stands for Hackensack Meridian Health. And so my daughter turned around, looked at me, and I said, don't you dare put that mask on. And she just looked at me, she's a grown woman, but she's like, I'm not gonna make my mom mad. And so I said to the woman, we don't do masks, okay? This is 2025, we're not putting that mask on. And I said, that doctor behind those glass windows there doesn't have a mask on. And what could she say? So they didn't turn us away, and we went on with our appointment. When we got into the room and her doctor came in, I said, I hope this isn't the last time we see you, because we're not wearing a mask. And he said, do you see a mask on me? I'm not wearing the mask either. So it's whoever's behind this mask thing, like, I don't know if we're talking about that. I just want to say, screw the mask.
That was a little,
I would just add that what we are talking about is a weaponization beyond the government. It was started by the government, and it's infected every civilian institution in the United States of America. And it's weaponized against you and your daughter, the average citizen. That's why it's so important to have organizations like the one you and John have started here. And I think we just have to continue to spread the word and get the work.
Yeah. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You gotta stand up, you gotta have the backbone, and you gotta push back.
yeah, go ahead.
There's maybe a little off the topic, but what's the role of the law schools? In other words, producing judges who find lawfare something that is palatable. Has there been any effort to say, what are you teaching law students and future judges here? Is that a futile thing? I hope not.
I think it's an interesting idea that there should be anti-racist classes in law school. or, you know, just treating the subject of weaponization at all there, but I'm not aware of any effort to teach students that if they become judges, they should avoid lawfare. I think it's kind of part of it is inherent in human nature. It's about character. Are you the type of character who's willing to abuse the power you have to implement your political ideas and to ride your hobby horse as a judge? Or are you the kind of character that can step that aside and then partially adjudicate cases of you? And to some extent, that's about teaching, but I think to a great extent, it's culture and character.
Correct, but I guess what I'm suggesting is how do we change the culture? In other words, we're dealing with it at the party level after the problem has already happened.
Yeah.
Why is this, there was a time when lawyers and judges would have found all of this anathema.
I think law schools should be required to teach a case study of the general counsel and Department of Defense lawyer, Terry Adderham, who wrote a memo that made the COVID vaccine mandate sound like it was lawful, knowing that she was giving unlawful direction and guidance to every commander and every civilian in the Department of Defense. That resulted in 90+% of our young men and women getting vaccinated by force, and this other, almost 100,000 Americans getting pushed out. That should be a case study in how not to twist the law to achieve your political objectives, especially in the United States Armed Forces, which is supposed to be the most apolitical organization we have. We lose that, ladies and gentlemen, and we totally lose this country. That should be a required case study, and every judge should be required to review that from the perspective that we have today and write something about it and issue something about it, because we have got to stop this. That one individual who was let off the hook and promoted to the CIA, I think she's gone now out of there, but that's what they were going to try to do with her, and no accountability whatsoever. And then the other issue is, ladies and gentlemen, there has been zero accountability beyond the top layer of all the senior lawyers in the military services who were fired by this Secretary of War, but the generals and admirals have had zero accountability. And they are still running the programs inside the Department of War. Do you expect that 100,000 Americans that were forced out due to an unlawful order are ever going to get brought back quickly and effectively and efficiently when the same generals and admirals are running the show? They are not. And that's a problem. We've got to address that, especially on the legal side.
Let me just add that the legal establishment has become so wealthy and powerful. We know that the state bars are being weaponized against individuals like Jeff Clark. Unfortunately, my idea probably isn't that popular, but I think that these law schools, one way to undermine them is just to simply take away their federal funding, which unfortunately probably won't happen anytime soon. But if you think about it, they're producing this legal establishment that is so skewed to one side, where it's like 95-5 or 99-1. Why should Republicans or anybody who has any common sense, why should we be funding them as taxpayers? And the second is, why should these state bars have the power, have the power that they have? And they're using it, they're already threatening the legal licenses of Trump administration officials. And the idea is, oh, we'll just threaten to take away their funding and then try to twist their arm, but that's not gonna work. They're just going to, if Trump leaves office, they're just gonna go back to what they were doing, or as soon as they sign the agreement with President Trump, they're gonna be undermining it. So I don't think we should be, keep on empowering these people, but I don't know if that's plausible.
Go ahead, right over.
Hi, my name is Tanya Pierce, and I work with the Ladies of Hope Ministry. Thank you. I want to just circle back on the appointees at the DOJ, that there's only a few, but the DOJ has regular employees that have been placed there for decades. We have a campaign called Remission Now for 27 women who are serving a life sentence for restitution. They've already served their prison sentences. They've already served their probationary sentences. But yet, because of what Doug was speaking about, conspiracy, people, including myself, I was convicted in the SDNY, the sister to the EDNY over here, for $35,000 after trial. But yet, I was sentenced to a $2.5 million restitution. Without any documentation, without an FDRA hearing, without any pushback. As of 10 months ago, I wrote to the DOJ because now the fog is clear. And I said, these entities were either out of business or have never made a lost claim. And I've been paying restitution for 11 years and never disbursement. And the letter I got back was because it goes to the bad debt fund. But the law says that in order for a victim should transfer their debt over or sign over their debt to the Department of Justice. How can anyone in this country, and I'm speaking for the 27 women in the Remission Now campaign, as well as I get tens, hundreds of calls each week about people who have been weaponized because of money that they don't owe. And when we see that President Trump, who campaigned and gave clemency to a good friend of mine, Judith Negron, and took away the debt that she didn't owe, these are the things that we're talking about, real freedom, because you can't be home serving a life sentence.
That's a good point. Yeah, good. Any comments on that?
We were talking about this a little bit before the panel, but restitution judgments are notoriously error-ridden and excessive. People who pretend they're victims in a criminal case can come forward with a profit-making motive. It's an easy way to make a buck. And to link this subject back to what we were talking about before on clemency, the president has a special power that people don't talk about very much, called the remission power, where the president can return restitution and forfeiture judgments that courts impose as well. And so another idea is to promote the White House's use of remissions. If we have these excessive restitution and forfeiture awards all over the country, we should be looking for those places and reporting them to the White House so that we can get people their money back. It's been a problem for decades.
You know, it makes me think, listening to you, Tanya, it makes me think that with Weaponization Watch, Doug and John, we should add another, part to it. And there should be all these stories, and accountability side to things. Because we have favor with the president. We do. We have favor with the president, and we have great favor with Ed Martin, John and I. And so I'm not saying that matters. I'm saying that, I think they would, they know the credibility, and I think they would pay attention. They know that we work with great lawyers. The president loves Mike Christie. And, collectively working with a group of people like this, we can expose a lot of things, So you inspired me, Tanya, just now, with another thought. We're gonna add it to the list. And these stories have to be heard all the time. Thank you.
We have time for one more before we wrap the panel. Let's go right there. There'll be another panel, I promise.
Rudy Giuliani's law license was yanked in New York. I know somebody in the state senate, a Democrat, fourth rat woman, who really pushed for that. Can that be reversed?
It could be reversed by the New York Court of Appeals, but I'm not really sure where his Mr. Giuliani's appeal stands right now. The president can't reverse that.
I mean, it was yanked for points of view. He contested the election results.
I'll have to challenge that in the Court of Appeals in New York.
Well, the walk in New York, I mean, that's like.
I think so. I think we have a minute, so let's go right there. We have like 2 minutes. So let's go.
So, we We talked a lot about how to get rid of the people who have weaponized our institutions out of government. What comes after? Unfortunately, a lot of these people have decades of experience, not just in leadership positions, but also in the rank and file. How do we close the experience gap between, let's say, the old guard and the new? The people who weaponize in our institutions and the replacements, so that we can maintain readiness to fight enemies in the global stage like Russia and China, and enemies domestically like criminals and organized crime. Thank you.
So, yeah, personnel is policy, absolutely. I think that I'm always encouraged when I'm reading in the news that individuals are getting fired in the FBI or DOJ. So the Trump administration has tried to say that they can fire lower level employees at will if they're not on board with the political agenda. I know it's a core fight. A lot of these career officials have merit protection and this kind of a thing, but hopefully we get some favorable court rulings. But then not only that, you're going to need it's a difficult task, but I think we need to make the case from the outside that a lot of these people should be fired and should be removed. How do we close the experience gap? I'm not sure, except we need people that are public-minded. You know, even when I'm talking about jury service, when we did jury selection, and a lot of people come up and they just try to get out of it as quickly as they can, you know. They say, oh, I always believe the police, or they say, I never believe the police, just so they can get out of jury service. They say, all my cousins are police officers. So, yeah, we need, conservatives need to be more service-minded, I believe, because a lot of times we're just trying to get out of things, so.
I challenge the premise of the question, that it's gonna leave an experience gap, from a Department of War perspective, that's BS, quite honestly. There are tens of thousands of military officers that have never violated their oath of office to the Constitution of the United States that would be more than happy to help. And the President of the United States, as a Commander-in-Chief, has the power to bring them back on active duty if he needs to. But there are also tens of thousands of military personnel that are waiting to come up, that have been trained, that have experience. On any given day, there's about 4,000 colonels just in the United States Air Force. Many of them are ready to be generals, but they may not have the right ideological view for this past Department of Defense. And the resistors that are in this bureaucracy, both in uniform and out in the Department of War, we don't need their kind of experience. They're the ones that brought us here. We don't need the experience that has taken us to endless war policies for the last 3 decades that have ended in disaster for our credibility, and now we're trying to reinstate deterrence as a standard daily operational effect, instead of sending our kids out to die on borders like the Russian-Ukraine border, which we don't give a damn about.
That's right. Wow. All right, we're going to wrap this panel up. Appreciate everybody's participation. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll come right back in how many minutes, Cynthia? What? Stories after the break, yes. How much time for the break, though?
Oh, just 5 minutes.
5-minute break. All right, here you go. All right, thanks, everybody.
Good job, Mike.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Good to see you again. See you.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Great.
Excellent. What's going on?
Fascinating discussion.
Have you talked to Cynthia?
I met Cynthia briefly, but she was so busy coordinating, we really didn't get to talk. There you go.
Works with us very closely.
Right back, 5-minute break.
Is it for us?
Yeah, here echoes, once you know one case, you kind of give the same patterns
So the patterns of abuse, the way they deal with discovery, FBI is it's like, oh, I hit with this. DVD movies, and when you're talking about where you do restitution, they always inflate it for the press release.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So then that ends up going on the other end of the funnel, as if it's a real number, when it's never real.
Right, right.
But you got, in federal court, you have to prove that that's not the truth.
Prove that it's not what that was saying.
urine being thrown in front of my guys. The reprisal, if he was okay, and he said, F off, pigs, left. That was during the peak of the 2018 midterm election, when we were, jobs, not mobs, were trending, because our jobs number were through the roof, and Antifa and BLM were mobbing the streets. The Governor Cuomo came up and decided to make a PR campaign against mobs, not jobs, and arrest 9 individuals for defending themselves. We didn't focus on anybody else. These gentlemen, these brave men, took it to trial here in New York City. The prosecutor's office and law enforcement did not know who these victims are. They never identified these victims because the victims disappeared. They went through trial with a jury not of their peers. And they were sentenced to 4 years in prison for defending themselves. I want to take a time machine to September 9th of 2016, where all of this started. Hillary Clinton called us, everybody in this room, a basket of deplorables. And although we took it for ourselves, we put it on t-shirts, we put it on hats, they meant it. They believed that we were deplorable human beings. After that, they started silencing us on social media because they lost an election. They're like, well, we gotta quiet these people down. Well, that didn't work. Then they went for financial platforms, PayPal, Cash App. That didn't work because we're not here for the money. Matter of fact, if you're in this business, if people call people grifters all the time, if you're in this business, this isn't a business, okay? You could probably make more money in an office job. We do this for passion. So when they took us off financial platforms, they saw that didn't work. It wasn't about money things. Then in 2019, what did they do? They locked us in our homes. They shut our businesses down. They said to keep away 6 foot distancing. We couldn't see our loved ones that went to the hospital. Some of them passed away and we never got to see them again. That didn't work. We had reopen campaigns across the country. Florida was one of the first states to reopen completely, successfully. Then they allowed riots and mayhem to hit the streets in the summer of love of 2020. That's what they called it. You guys remember fiery but peaceful? As the buildings burned behind them, they allowed that to happen. None of that worked. So what did they have to do? The ultimate way to silence the American people is stole an election. And then they had the audacity to say that the reason that people went into the Capitol was because President Trump was lying about the election and pointed them there. I didn't go to DC because President Trump pointed me there. I was going to DC because of everything that happened before that. Deplorable, broke, silenced, our businesses destroyed. I didn't get to see my uncle when he passed away because of COVID. And then that didn't work. So what did they do? They put us in chains. I did 3 years in solitary confinement. And I don't even think that's the ultimate goal. When the president decided to get up and run again, and fight, like his hat says, They saw a huge problem. President at that very moment had already gone through 2 failed impeachments, 4 criminal indictments. What was next? They wanted to put him in prison. They wanted to take him off the ballot. The lawfare continued. Then they tried to assassinate him. Twice. The hat I'm wearing right now is a blood spatter right there to represent how close our country came to chaos. I'm Cuban. My family immigrated here legally. I'll say that before I start. Legally in the 60s, after the Castro regime, and I'm gonna quote Castro himself, something I rarely do. He said, "My movement isn't about communism. My movement is not about socialism. We're gonna create a republic." That's what he said. It took less than 3 months after he took power to side with the Soviets and instill, I'd say, the most oppressive government on the Western Hemisphere. So what I'm seeing, what I saw during those times, and before that, we saw that with Obama, but I do want to focus. It's the same thing, the same reason that my grandfather tells me all the time. He's like, man, what did I flee for? You know, it's happening here in drips. It didn't come at the snap of a finger like it did in Cuba. But it's coming in drips, and it's been coming in drips for a very long time. The only thing that stopped it is this new movement of deplorables, the MAGA movement. But we always, the word, I think the most important word in weaponization watch is the word watch. It means vigilance. It means looking forward and seeing the obstacles we have in our way. We have less than 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, to turn this ship around. And the weaponization is the biggest threat to our constitutional republic. Since we overthrew the king in 1776, when we created probably the most prosperous and freedom-loving people the world's ever known. But vigilance is key because we need to be able to stop the weaponization, stop the sorry, I'm Cuban, of our government. English is my second language, by the way. I'm waiting for ice. But I will tell you that in a very short amount of time, President Trump is not going to be president. And we have a lot of work to do, and I really, really got to give a shout out and my appreciation to Cynthia for putting this together. She's basically Nick Fury putting the Avengers together for this. And weaponization, it's not defense. It's not just defense, it's offense. And sitting in the back there is my civil attorney, Thomas. A round of applause for Thomas. The attorney took the offensive in these January 6 cases, and we became the first January 6ers to sue the federal government for the weaponization that occurred during the Biden administration. It's not Enrique Tarrio versus the United States. It's Enrique Tarrio versus the Biden regime and what they did. Because what they did to my family and what they did to the families and the 1,600 other individuals was atrocious. They made an example out of us, and we need to make an example out of them. And I truly believe that with Weaponization Watch, it will be the forefront, the tip of the spear, to end the weaponization of the federal government. Thank you very much, guys.
outside the seat, I hope?
I love that question. Yes, that was one of the first things our attorney Thomas had told us we can't do it in DC. We have currently filed in the Middle District of Florida. Any questions, Robert?
I have one question. When you were put in solitary confinement, was it before or after you were convicted of crime?
Before and after. The entire time, 3 years, I was in a concrete coffin.
And were you violent towards any of the prisoners before they put you into solitary?
Absolutely not. As soon as I got there, that's the first thing they told me.
So why did they put you in solitary confinement?
I actually want to tell you a story about that.
I want to hear it. Go ahead.
So you guys remember the Lockerbie bomber, the shoe bomber?
Yeah.
I was in Alexandria Detention Center. You know, it's a bomber, you know? And we ended up going to court together. And they put us in the van, but they separate us. And I'm like, okay, oh wow, they're separating me from this terrorist. So we go to court, we come back, and on the way back, they pull him out first. And they walk him in, they take his handcuffs off, and he walks into the facility. And they pull me out, they keep me in handcuffs, and they shut down the entire floor just to walk me to my cell. They weren't protecting me from him. They were protecting him from me. And just so you guys know, I was not even accused of any violence. None of my 5 co-defendants, same thing. There was no violence in our case. So yeah, they did it because they put terrorism, the Biden administration put a terrorism label on me, and I was moved to 40 federal prisons, county jails, federal holdovers in my time. That is a record. Not just a record of 22 years, but that is a record for the Bureau of Prisons. Anybody else?
Thank you, Enrique. When people hear your story, the fact that you weren't even there that day is pretty extraordinary, considering what they've done to you. So that's just, one story. Now you're going to hear another one. This is the wife of retired NYPD officer Mike McMahon, who was just up on our panel. And you'll be able to hear the other side of weaponization. We call that the humanitarian side. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. I can't believe if you told me that in my lifetime I would be standing here talking to all of you about my husband being a spy for the CCP. I think you're insane. A little background about myself. I was on a soap opera called As the World Turns for 20 years. I met Mike when I was 23. And we've been together for 34 years. So I met this hero NYPD cop with, yes. I was married to a real life hero, an amazing father, amazing brother, sisters, got an incredible family, and I married into the best family on the planet, which, when things like this happen in your life, you find out that very quickly who your friends are, but when you have a family of 9 siblings, then you find out who your cousins, and that support system actually gets you through it. And I think, for me, I was very naive because I was with a cop who always did things by the book, and he would come home talking about his cases and how he literally earned 78 medals while he was on the NYPD in it is a short career of 13 years, and worked in some of the dangerous parts of the city, as in the street crime unit. I don't know if you heard about the street crime unit, but they were like the most elite guys in the city who changed this entire city and made it safe again. Thank you, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, for doing that, and earned a Combat Cross for a gang-related shooting, my husband, where he was actually given the award by Rudy Giuliani in One Police Plaza. And then my husband was in a police chase and hit a telephone pole 50 miles an hour and ended his police career, which, as his wife, I was horrified for him because he loved his job. He loved what he did. He just put everything. He was the guy you wanted to show up when you called 911. He was the one who would run into the burning buildings and take on the shooters and deal with gang members and deal with homeless people and being humane to them. And he was finished, and he became a private investigator part-time. I'd worked my whole life. We were doing well. and I was on a soap opera, very successful. I've won 3 Emmys in my job. We were doing really well, thank you. And Emmys actually don't mean anything except unless you want to talk to congressmen. That actually kind of helps to kind of get you at least in the door sometimes. That was actually the best thing about my career, was how I was able to help my husband. I will say that as wonderful as to be an actress and do what I did, being able to help my husband get home was my greatest accomplishment in my life. And I did not do that alone. Cynthia Hughes. Congressman Michael Lawler is on another level. I'm just telling you right now, that man was from the beginning, before he was even elected, was on our side and said, if I get elected, I'm going to help you. And answered every phone call, every email, called me. I mean, when he was trying to work for the pardon to get Mike pardoned, calling the president, calling the White House counsel, getting me on the phone with the White House counsel, making emails, calling me at 10 o'clock at night saying, I'm working on it, I'm working on it, I'm working on it. I'm telling you, if I'm going to give one piece of advice, you need to find your hero. You need to find your advocate who means it. There's a lot of congressmen who say that they want to help, and they're busy, but they're busy. They have other things going on. Find the one who wants to do the advocating for you. Congressman Lawler, also after my husband's brother passed away from 9/11 illness, honored him on the House floor. I mean, this man is different. He's just cut differently. But from a family perspective, what it does, now, I knew when he came home after being taken out of our home, without handcuffs, mind you, didn't take his guns, didn't take his computers, didn't take anything. They were petting my dog. This was not a normal arrest. This was just for optics, this whole case. I've written a book called In the Interest of Justice if you want to read more about the case and what it's really all about. But today we're talking about weaponization. We're talking about the optics of a case and destroying a family for it, okay? This was no doubt in my mind. I said, you're never taking a plea deal. You did absolutely nothing wrong. We have 3 children. How do you tell your children that, you know what, yeah, just admit you did something wrong, and so we can save $1 million or $3 million, and you can just walk through your life, people pointing at you saying you're a spy, you're this, you're horrible, your father's a spy. No.
That's right.
Thank you. I said to Mike, I said, we'll sell our house. I don't care. I grew up with nothing. I grew up with a great family and support system. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And our lawyers were amazing and supportive and patient, okay? But when we went to trial, and I sat in that courtroom, and I heard the prosecutor on day 1 manufacture evidence to the jury and lie to the jury and manipulate the judge, and the judge allowed him to manipulate the jury, I said, we are screwed. And I don't know what is going to happen here, but it's not good. Not one piece of the media was positive, not one story about my husband's heroism, nothing in the media about his career. Not one piece of media was about his career. It was all about China and spying and this. The people he was following were CCP officials from Wuhan. They were not citizens, they were not dissidents. Nothing in the media about that, nothing. So I knew we were up against it. And then when he was convicted, I mean, I'm dramatic. They'll never forget me in those hallways, what I was saying, but anyway, yeah, wrap it up. I'm TV, this is like TV, wrap it up. But what I want to tell you about the media, so my story was, we could talk a lot, but so just so you understand the media, I'm going to give you one example. The Wall Street Journal in July of 2020 wrote an article about how the CCP is using civil lawfare to go after dissidents in the United States, okay? There's a story in the Wall Street Journal, and in there is a picture of these 2 Chinese people, and it has Jinzhou and Fanglu and their pictures in there, in this article, saying that they are being targeted civilly in the United States. Wall Street Journal. My husband was arrested on October 28th, 2020. That same journalist who wrote that story in 2020, she wrote the story about my husband's arrest with a link going to that story in 2020, July. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that she wanted that to happen, show them that they were victims. They are not victims, okay? And I was tracking that for years and years and years. So I reached out to her, asked her, I was kind of, I do troll a little bit. LinkedIn has been wonderful, by the way. Just I highly recommend it if you really want to get some people to talk to you. So after Mike's conviction, and I had reached out to this writer, and I had my moment with her, and I still have it. And I said to her, finally, I said, starting with your July 29th, 2020 story and your lack of telling the truth about fox hunt cases, which is the Chinese operations, which my husband was arrested for, your failure to do your job and put all the facts out there put my family in danger. You betrayed this country, and you should be ashamed to call yourself a journalist. I hope whatever relationship you have with the government was worth it. What I'm saying to you is that's the reality of the media with the government. And I promise you, I will continue to address this, and they need to be held accountable. They need to be subpoenaed. They need to find out who was planting that story to make that person do that. I have my ideas, and they're not just ideas. They're based in actual facts. So we need to keep, like I said, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Wrap it up, I know. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go to commercial. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, John Schlafly. Thank you, Cynthia. Put a period on it.
We're going to move to our next panel right now. So if you're on the next panel, come on up. We'll get the chairs going and get our next panel. So want to shift gears here, want to talk about reform measures and have an introduction on that and have a discussion like we did last time. Our panelists that we have for the second panel, well, we have Thomas Knepp. Where's Thomas? Thomas, there you go. Thank you. We have John Morrow. And Nick Smith. So I'll give you guys each, 5 minutes just to, introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about, what's going on today and your thoughts. Go ahead, Joe.
Let me first channel Saving Private Ryan. We're in the company of heroes, and two of them I'd like to point out, Cynthia Hughes and John Schlafly. They have done amazing work. They are true patriots. And the work has just started in many ways, because for the opposition, their motto is weaponization today, weaponization tomorrow, weaponization forever. They are preparing for their comeback, and they're doing it with the same sorts of tools and the same arrogance and the same corruption that they used in 2020. And it's going to be worse the next time, unless we stay united and unless we start dealing with some of the structural issues that we're going to talk about today. I represented President Trump in the January 6th case. I defended him when no other law firm, no big law firm in the country, would take his defense. The first thing I did is hire my own lawyer. Honest to God, because they were going to come after me, and they did. I sometimes feel like the Forrest Gump of weaponization. I also represent the One Taste group, Nicole Desdon, who's in prison, Rachel Churwitz, who are in prison for their spiritual beliefs because they opposed a woke prosecution team that does not believe in female sexuality and the empowerment of female sexuality. They look at all women as victims. Awful. And they criminalized a statute. They're looking 15 years in jail, and there's not one single victim in that case. But we need structural reform beyond President Trump. First of all, we have to eliminate immunity for prosecutors and law enforcement on day one. No prosecutor is a king or queen. And they have to be held accountable. They have to be brought before juries. The same thing for law enforcement. You violate the law, you're going to trial by a jury of our peers. Second, we have to reform these statutes. President Trump was indicted for conspiracy for taking a position and challenging the 2020 results. That was in the indictment. The theory was, according to the Biden Department of Justice, that he lied about the 2020 results, and therefore he was guilty of conspiracy. He was also charged with a KKK conspiracy dating back to the Civil War. The same thing that Doug was prosecuted for. When I went to see a thug prosecutor named Jack Smith, he said, well, we can prosecute him because there was this case in the Eastern District. We just got a conviction for a meme under the same statute, KKK statute. We have to reform the statutes. We have to work with Congress. Nicole and Rachel are in jail for violating something called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. They didn't traffic a single person. They had a spiritual and sensual practice that the Biden administration, the woke prosecutors did not like, and they got prosecuted under this statute. It has to stop. It has to end. And the first thing we need to do is reform the criminal statutes that give incredible discretion to prosecutors. Weaponization is a function of prosecutorial misconduct. Ed Martin, you visit him, the dude is amazing. I mean, you know, all heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear trench coats. And he's like all there. He's like everywhere. But where's his staff? He needs 50 lawyers. When they came after President Trump, they had 35 prosecutors and 50 agents working on the case. They assembled 14 million documents and 500 witness interviews. And the thug prosecutor, Jack Smith, said, I want a trial in 90 days. 90 days. The judge said, no, that's really unreasonable. We'll give you 120 days to prepare for trial. And by the way, Mr. Lauro, don't talk about politics in my courtroom, but we'll set the trial for the Monday before Super Tuesday. Where were the rule of law people? Where were the crying liberals? So we have to deal with structural issues. And finally, we need better judges. We need courageous judges, and there has to be a litmus test. Thou shalt not weaponize the law. Thou shalt abide by the Constitution. And thou shalt honor due process. All of the stories we heard today, and I've been practicing law as a criminal defense lawyer for 40 years, and I no longer put this on my resume, but I was a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York before that. And that place is a cesspool. But every single instance that we heard is a denial of due process. We need judges that will respect the law, respect due process, and not look at themselves as politicians in robes. And that has got to change, absolutely. I have hope. I have hope because of people like Cynthia and John, but we will either hang together or we will most certainly hang separately. But we have our work cut out for us.
So my name is Thomas Kniff. John has already said a lot of things that I was probably going to touch on, so I'll try to keep it shorter so we can get to the Q&A. And also, you already heard from Nick, but you can never hear too much from a great legal mind like Nick. He's got a lot to say. But I am a criminal defense attorney. I've been practicing criminal law in the civilian and also in the military context. I'm a Iraq War veteran, served in the Army JAG Corps, both on active and reserve duty. So that's what I've been doing for about 20 years. And before that, I was a prosecutor as well, state level. I represent a lot of clients that are that face the working end of a weaponized justice system. Many know the name Daniel Penny. I represented Daniel Penny and successfully got him acquitted in New York. I represented individuals, been in the news a lot lately, Charles Foner, and Charlie is a 67-year-old man who unfortunately is about to embark on a 4-year state prison sentence for defending himself against a perp with 15 prior convictions who tried to rob him. Although we were successful in avoiding having him prosecuted for any homicide-related charges, because of this city's draconian gun laws, drug laws draconian too, but the gun laws, that make it virtually impossible for a law-abiding citizen to possess a firearm to protect themselves from exactly the sort of situation that Charlie found himself in. The Queens DA's office prosecuted him on the unlicensed gun, and ultimately it wasn't a defendable case, and 4 years was the best that they would let us do. I also have, I hope I don't embarrass him, but Anthony Lisi here is a retired NYPD officer who faced the weaponization of the federal government in the Southern District of New York, a case disturbingly similar in a lot of ways to Mike McMahon's case. And look, all us attorneys love to fancy ourselves the, greatest, most prominent attorneys there are, and I think with the guys next to me, it's certainly true. But look, I'm just a small criminal defense. There's a lot of lawyers out there, right? And the fact that, someone like me, little old me, has, can rattle off multiple cases that are active right now. I'm not even talking about the pardon applications that we have pending, God willing, in Ed Martin's office and beyond. But the fact that, at any given time, I could rattle off numerous cases and cite numerous cases. Some are in the media, some you never hear about, which are just, vivid examples of government weaponization at the state and federal level. That should give everyone in this room chills. Weaponization is all around us. I know there's some folks in the room that heard me speak a couple of weeks ago at the Women's National Republican Club. And a point I made there that I'll make again briefly now is, weaponization isn't just in who the government decides to prosecute. I submit it also exists in circumstances where the government declines to prosecute people who need to be prosecuted. If Jordan Neely, a couple of vivid examples of that, if Jordan Neely wasn't continuously re-released onto the streets of the city of New York and its subway systems, despite being on a 50 most dangerous list, despite nearly 50 prior convictions. And by the way, those who practice in the state level in New York, you think, oh, there's 50 prior convictions. Wow, he must have been arrested 50 times. You have to be arrested hundreds of times before you sustain 50 convictions, right? Almost no one gets a criminal conviction on their first arrest in New York, right? Federal is different, but I'm talking about, I'm talking about the people that our government, does inverse weaponization on, the people that they put back out who really should be taken off the streets or put in a mental hospital. So that means that, if somebody has 50 prior convictions, that means they're getting arrested every week. And certainly in Jordan Neely's case, there was so much we weren't allowed to talk about at trial, including the fact that the night before at the very same subway station where he boarded before Daniel Penny was forced to subdue him, he tried to push a woman in front of the train tracks, onto the train tracks in front of a moving train 12 hours before. We weren't allowed to talk about that. So in any event, it's all around us. It's a major problem. And I'll touch briefly before I pass the mic to something Nick said. Look, if you are serious about weaponization and wanting to counter it, all right, none of us have any business criticizing any pardon that Trump is giving, all right? I'm just saying, you know, if you're taking that stance, you can't, you know, you can't be against weaponization and criticize the pardons. Are there people that, you know, perhaps, you know, it shouldn't be pardoned, or it's eyebrow raising, what have you? Okay, fine. It's still important, because what it's doing is it's sending a message to these federal prosecutors who think that they answer no one but God, and maybe they don't even think they answered him, that no, you know, this is not a sovereign district. This is Southern District of New York, fancied itself for years. No, you know, if you don't, until we can get legislative reform, if you don't start changing the way you do business, then yeah, you can spend unlimited resources, months, billion, you know, the sort of voluminous discovery that John was talking about, get your conviction, and we'll pull the legs right out from under you. Even if you don't like that particular person pardoned or the facts of that case, it still serves a purpose. And it's one of the only things, one of the only real powerful tools that I think the administration has now, until we get the legislative reform, which we desperately need, and God willing, we'll get. So.
Let's say John Laura's prophecy is correct, and that when the White House changes hands again, if it does, lawfare's coming back, and it's coming back really hard. The question is, what can we do right now in 3 years, not just to kind of stop lawfare that's already occurred before, but to entrench reforms that keep this from happening again, and the fastest way of doing that. So we're talking about legislative fixes. Everybody knows that's kind of a struggle to get Congress to do anything. But just think about what happened in Trump 1, the first Trump White House. We had 2 major pieces of criminal justice reform. We had the First Step Act, and we had something called the Due Process Protections Act, which doesn't get as much attention. But Trump was able to accomplish bipartisan criminal justice reform because Democrats can't say no to that. That's totally inconsistent with their platform policy. So we have a unique window right now to get something done legislatively that wouldn't ordinarily exist. We have the clemency path that we've been talking about, but going bigger with it, and clemency pardons can't be undone. So let's say this White House were to do something about over-criminalization, about vague laws using pardons. The next White House couldn't do that. Let's say this White House was sort of shifting reform in the direction of white collar, which is usually more Republican friendly. A Democratic administration couldn't unwind that. Almost like legislation can be unwound. A pardon can never be unwound. And then I think the last piece of this is building back the taboo of ideologues making prosecution decisions and the politicization of prosecution decisions. It used to be unheard of. No line prosecutor would ever think about doing that decades ago. And now when it's become normalized, the taboo lessens and you'll see more of it. But just raising awareness like we are, like Weaponization Watch is doing, is putting a stop to it in some way, because it's educating the culture. It's changing the mores of how prosecutors do things. So I think if I've got one point, it's that we need to accelerate efforts while we have time. Right now, we don't have a lot of time.
I do want to open it up for discussion here about some of these reforms that we're talking about, statute reform, the people who, perpetuate the abuse, how could we target them? How could we, level the playing field, and just discussing reforms with discovery and possibly a new office for public integrity and things along that nature. So I want to know if anybody in the room wants to start the conversation for these experts, and then we'll.
Just before I forget, I had, as you were talking about, and I wanted to address this, because maybe when we break down to smaller groups, this is I think a good idea. I know several former U.S. attorneys who are appalled at what's going on in their culture now. And I think we should recruit them to become part of this format to go back against what you're talking about, which is to speak up and say, this is not how we used to do it. This was unacceptable. I've had former U.S. attorneys read our case and go, they are appalled at what has happened. So just to put that as an idea of maybe reaching out or getting some sort of, and Cynthia, maybe this is something we should do, is like getting recruited maybe 5 or 10 former US attorneys who are either retired and not afraid to come out, or some that are, maybe not so retired or recently went out and said, you know what, or maybe somebody in our case, who will step forward. We've had whistleblowers come forward in our case, thank God. And maybe that will happen in the future, but to get them to have, from a legal standpoint, to be able to fight back against that was just an idea that I thought maybe we could put on the table for the future, as I'm thinking about it. Because there's so many people, right, that we met, that we worked with, who said, I can't believe this has happened, I'm so disappointed, and I apologize for what we used to be. And if we used to be that, it can happen again. It's just that we have to call them out and expose these cases, like you said, do case studies. They should take Mike's case and do a case study on it and shame them for what they've done. So they don't want to do it again because it's not something that either, like you said, who's the character of these people? Zero. And nobody wants to hate that press, we know that. But they also hate their colleagues saying, oh, by the water cooler whispering. But I think we can really change to bring in former people who've had great cases, high-profile U.S. attorneys possibly who've done in the public eye to join our cause. And I think it takes one, then you'll have 2, and then you'll have 10. But that was just an idea that I thought maybe you could reflect on and think about that.
I think it's hard to find federal prosecutors, at least, that are committed to the rule of law and constitutionalism. The law schools have become radicalized in the last 25 years, where the objective is power and the objective is cultural transformation and not doing the right thing. And that's carried over to the Department of Justice. I was involved in the transition with Attorney General Bondi. It's hard to find lawyers that believe, as we do, in constitutional protections and doing the right thing and addressing all of the abuses that are going on. I was in the Eastern District of New York. It's a freaking cesspool, and it's been that way for a long time. So I don't know if there's a quick answer, but I would say this: we have to pay a lot of attention to how the Department of Justice is basically controlled, and also the hiring process. It's hard to get constitutionally minded lawyers to go to the Department of Justice. Very, very hard. And then finally, I think we need these structural reforms. Otherwise, we're going to be in this mess, if not worse. Can you imagine an AOC presidency?
John, you keep telling us there's going to be an AOC presidency. I don't like it.
Scaring everyone.
It's a scary thought, John.
I know.
But you might be right.
It could happen, and that's why we can't simply rely on the current lineup, because it changes.
Yep. Got a question?
I mean, I think, I agree with comments, right? But I think that we can't lose sight of not only activist prosecutors, but activist judges. And I think one of the things that we're missing is a mechanism to enforce disciplinary admonishment actions against activist prosecutors who are acting unethically, if not illegally, and judges, right? I mean, there's a fear of retaliation by lawyers. I'm a lawyer, I'm in New York, right? I mean, I know there's trepidation and fear against filing a complaint against a judge, right? So the barrier between an attorney where people file grievance complaints willy-nilly, and a grievance committee will take any complaint, and I've worked on a couple, without any vetting. People could make up anything about a lawyer, and a grievance committee will take it and send a letter to a lawyer, and all of a sudden this lawyer has to notify the malpractice provider, has to hire a lawyer him or herself. But judges seem beyond reproach, and prosecutors. We need to change the law in terms of judicial review and admonishment, because we're talking about, we could control if the Republicans control the Senate and who Trump nominates and they get confirmed. But the activist judges that exist could pretty much do what they want beyond reproach. So I think we really need to work on figuring out mechanistically, how can people work to file a complaint and have the shield of cover because they're worried about retaliation as if they live in the Soviet Union? And two, how can we update the rules with regard to dealing with prosecutorial misconduct in, the federal courts? I mean, the state courts are just another issue. But both, federal misconduct by activist prosecutors and judges.
So I think, look, I understand, the sentiments, right? Making complaints and against judges, maybe providing anonymity and so that people don't have to fear for retribution or even against prosecutors. But, in my experience, that kind of stuff, no matter how you do it, only goes so far because inevitably, it's perceived as a disenchanted litigant or a disenchanted lawyer railing against the judge, and the judge is the judge. I'm not saying there's no value in it, but I don't think that that's going to get real change. What I think could get changed, and I do think, I'm a pragmatist. I do understand the difficulty in getting anything passed in this climate, but as Nick brought up, look, under Trump 1, we did have the First Step Act. We had some really, pretty seismic changes, and it hadn't happened in almost forever. Criminal justice reform was one of, and I think still can be one of those few areas that you can get both sides agreeing on. If for no other reason, I think it's more than this, but I think if for no other reason, even the side not in power or the side in power realizes that, look, eventually the pendulum's gonna go the other way. We don't want to be, we want some insulation against what may be coming. And I think we also, both sides under Trump 1 realize that, look, these jail sentences that we're handing out for, drug offenses and nonviolent crimes and so forth are just disproportional. And you actually have seen, I think, a shift in that. If you look at, the federal sentencing guidelines and what the recommended ranges are and what federal judges are actually sentencing people to, in many cases, if not the majority of cases, it's far below what the sentence could be. Now, if you shouldn't be prosecuted in the first place and you're sentenced to 18 months instead of 36 months, it doesn't really, it's something, but it's not enough. So as far as changes, I think a lot of these things can be done and it doesn't have to be, I think they can be incremental, but still have a profound impact. One thing that comes to mind is level the playing field within a federal courtroom, right? And this always gets me, right? A defendant in the United States of America is presumed innocent, right? We all understand that, or at least that's the way the law says it is. But every defense attorney who's ever walked into a courtroom, and I don't care if the judge is a Reagan appointee, a Bush appointee, Obama, Clinton, whether they're former federal prosecutors or taken from, the Southern Poverty Law Center and put on a bench, the vibe in that courtroom is, what is the defense up to? What is the defense trying to get away with? And the prosecutors seem, just by default, the virtuous one. And if you think about something like the presumption of innocence, right, that's kind of upside down. Like, you would think it would be that, well, here's a defendant who presumably is being falsely prosecuted. What are these prosecutors up to? What are you up to there, Mr. U.S. Attorney? It's almost never like that. It is never like that. So how could you level the playing field? One thing would be, and I know this sounds, wonky to the non-lawyers in the room, but it's a big deal. Change jury selection in a federal criminal trial. To simplify what I mean is, in a federal criminal trial, the defense attorneys have very little control over picking the jury. It's really minimal. The judge asks all the questions, you submit questions in advance, and the judge waters them down, and it's like a lot of, nothingness. So, it's kind of like I say to my young daughters, you get what you get and you don't get upset. That's kind of like what you have in a federal courtroom. To put that in context, in a state level courtroom, voir dire, or voir dire, as they call it in the South, if there are any Southerners here, is very, lawyers have a great amount of control and influence over it. It's often said at the state level that cases are won and lost in voir dire. Put in the context of the Daniel Penny case, we went through 450 jurors over 8 days, right? And if I didn't have the opportunity to do that in a jurisdiction that a year later went overwhelmingly from Mandami, right? Because what some people don't get is, when you're trying a case in New York City, you're trying in Manhattan, you only got Manhattan jurors. So it's not even like I could pull from Staten Island or from Eastern Queens. It was Manhattan, the most liberal of the 5 boroughs. To be able to find 12 jurors that were capable of acquitting someone like Danny Penny, that might have not happened if it was the federal system, because I couldn't call, I couldn't get into, well, have you ever been robbed on the subway? Do you have any relatives with psychiatric issues? All these questions that you probably wouldn't be able to ask, or certainly wouldn't have been able to ask in the same way in a federal courtroom. If there was a change to the federal rules of procedure, right, and this isn't something that's going to get the average person, you guys are probably bored to hell just listening to me talk about it. It's not something that's going to I think going to come some incendiary issue that you're going to have this partisan divide about. I think it's something that could get, where the system resembled more of a state system. Believe me, that would make a huge difference in creating parity. And one of the reasons why federal prosecutors act the way they do is because they know it's so hard for them to lose, okay? Another thing, discovery reform, right? So look, at the state level in New York State, they enacted discovery reform and they did it to the extreme, but it shows you how effective it is, because the legislature in Albany's goal was to have as few arrests, prosecutions, and convictions as possible, because they're all woke reformers who want violent criminals to, be in the subway, not in the jail. But it had a profound effect, and as a result of that, you have all these state-level cases that are either being offloaded, they go out speedy trial and so forth, because it puts this tremendous burden on the prosecution. Again, in New York, it went too far to the other right, to the other extreme. But if you did it in a federal system in a structured way, it would create more parity. Federal prosecutors get to withhold evidence, what we call 3500 material, till the very bit, to like the eve of trial. You could change that, and they'd have to provide it absent a protective order much earlier. It would eliminate the mystery, because federal prosecutors use that intrigue. Well, you don't know what we have. Well, how do you advise your client whether to plead guilty or not under those circumstances? As also has been brought up already, ending absolute prosecutorial immunity. There's no reason for it. Police officers don't have it. It's not going to fix everything. The fact that police officers have qualified immunity doesn't mean that you don't have police brutality anymore, but it acts as a check on it. So there's all sorts of things like that that can be done that can make a federal trial more of a level playing field, and I think would change a lot permanently, regardless of whether or not we have a president AOC or not.
And Tom, let me just say, I think that the whole issue of weaponization was hatched by elite lawyers in the beginning of the Biden administration. I know these lawyers, they were federal prosecutors, and the goal was to take out a political movement using the criminal justice system from top to bottom. Weaponization was hatched by these lawyers with access to the White House. The goal was to take out President Trump and everybody who protested on J6 and everybody in between. And we have to understand what weaponization was all about and how we can defend the next time, because it's going to come back and it's going to be a lot worse. And a lot of people in this room will be the objects of that weaponization the next time around.
So the only thing I would add is that I agree, with John. How I would frame it, though, was, the Biden administration was the culmination, was the, symphony of perverse symphony of weaponization, right? But it existed before, right? And it might have been less organized, more micro level. Like, for instance, as if you're an assistant U.S. attorney, right? the greatest scalp you can, trophy, better than any plaque you can put on your wall is the scalp of a politician, of any party. And that's how you get promoted. That is the gold standard. I took out a politician, right? Because where state level prosecutors, they had this general crime control belongs to the states as per the Constitution. The feds have the luxury of being selective of who they go after. So they don't want to go after, a ho-hum offense that isn't going to get a good press release, they're going to get a headline. So for years, it had been, let's nail a political scalp to the wall. Now you got your war trophy, now you can become, deputy bureau chief. Literally, it's a case out in the Southern District in 2021, a public political figure, they prosecuted him, got the conviction, and, a week later, the AUSA on the case is promoted to bureau chief. It's just how it works. Second, sadly for all of us, is lawyers. That was always another good war trophy for a federal prosecutor. If you took out a lawyer, corrupt lawyer. And then also part and parcel of that was law enforcement. You get a cop, get a dirty cop, alleged dirty cop. So it existed, for some time, but, under the Biden administration, it became an organized agenda, in my opinion.
One idea I'd add to the wish list that you just had for reforms right here is
more.
there's a sentencing rule in economic crime cases, so-called white-collar cases, which says your sentence should be higher if you, quote, stole more money. And this rule's existed forever. It's called the loss table. Lawyers have hated it for years and years and years. People have talked about getting rid of this rule forever because it creates crazy results in so many cases. You're not necessarily more guilty because $50,000 was involved versus $10,000 and $1 million versus $600,000. There can be extremely close cases involving large amounts of money. So you get these sentences in cases that are like 30 years or life when they just don't make sense at all. And everyone in the system, the professors, the lawyers, even the prosecutors know this is a dreadful way of sentencing people, but no one's gotten rid of it. That would be my position.
Just one last thing I want to add. Another element of weaponization is also these activist judges moving forward with nationwide injunctions. So you have a federal district judge in a certain jurisdiction issues a nationwide injunction affecting national legislation. That's something that's within the realm of Congress to address, and I think that needs immediacy. Because you see that right now with a lot of these immigration issues where somebody is detained by ICE in Pennsylvania, and then there's a nationwide injunction that's impacting someone, ICE agents in Arizona or California. It's ludicrous. That could be definitely, through congressional legislation, the role of that judge could be limited.
100%. We gotta wrap. We gotta
No questions?
you can make it quick.
Just in terms of, from my perspective, we talked a lot about the conspiracy issues and how they started taking the common law idea of conspiracy and floated it so that it can be applied to any negative behavior, which is something that happened with Enrique. And it is something that we as attorneys can just challenge on our own because there are constitutional problems with the way that, for instance, the tool theory that was used to indict and convict Enrique, where there was some third party, not party to the quote-unquote conspiracy they invented, who did an affirmative act, and that act was imputed into the people he was working with, right? Now that completely destroys it. That's an unconstitutional application, and the way the statutes are written doesn't really put you on notice that that's what's going to happen. And it seems to me that, and I don't know if this is possible from your end or it has to be a civil way, but taking away their ability to impose unconstitutionally broad interpretations of conspiracy statutes is something that we can actually challenge as attorneys and then get cases in the appeals court and the Supreme Court which say that that's not an acceptable interpretation or application of that law. And I was just wondering if you thought that was a feasible process forward.
Personally, I think, it's feasible, but it's, slow and tortured and may not be successful. I think that, I would like to see more legislative change in that. Like, for instance, and I know we're going to be quick, so I know we're short on time. Under the federal bail law, it says that the bail statute says that a defendant should be released on the least restrictive means necessary, sufficient to return to assure their return to court. Some equivalent added to the criminal procedural law of the U.S. Code, which, states in sum and substance that a statute by default should be read, or the words in the statute should be given the most restrictive meaning, possible, as opposed to what we have now, which is the broadest possible meaning. Something like that, I think, would go a long way, and I think that's another situation where you'd have people on both sides of the aisle saying, instead of, let's take fraud, force, and coercion, the sex trafficking statute that John's clients are, and give it the, broadest, look, anybody who's ever went out, you listen to one of my favorite Christmas songs, Baby It's Cold Outside. That's fraud, force, and coercion. You're gonna take your coat and, give you another glass of wine, and those lyrics would get somebody convicted under the federal human trafficking laws. Merry Christmas, everyone.
I'm not gonna sing that anymore, but I was struck by one thing in the Supreme Court when we were arguing US v. Trump. Justice Alito said, I can't make heads or tails out of the federal conspiracy statute. Because basically, you're telling me, Mr. Government, that if somebody like President Trump, who is asserting that the election was stolen and advocating that he could be guilty of basically impairing in a conspiratorial way a government function. And here we have the justice of the Supreme Court saying, I can't make heads or tails out of it.
It's a real life thought crime. Basically, the federal conspiracy statute is an Orwellian thought crime. That's, in its most base sense, in my opinion.
We got to wrap it up there. We're over time, sorry. But we're going to move on here to the fireside chat. Cynthia Hughes and Dr. Topeka Sam. So thank our panelists.
Good thing you told me I was about to go to the restroom. A Robert Durst moment.
I didn't recognize you. How are you? Pretty good? Yeah, I'll take one. You?
Oh, boy.
My stylist over there is helping me out.
We have our chat, we have Cynthia Hughes, of course. A round of applause for Cynthia Hughes, everybody. And Dr. Topeka Sam, they're going to be talking about the weaponization of war on drugs and their shared experiences as unlikely allies facing systemic injustice. So, Cynthia, why don't you?
Have at it. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. You know, Topeka, I'm going to let you lead us off because I'd like the conversation to start with you.
Okay.
I got to speak a lot about where I'm at with weaponization, and I want people to hear from you and what you're working on and lead the way.
Okay, well, thank you.
Can I say something to start? Introduce you guys?
No.
So Topeka Sam and Cynthia Hughes are two women I've gotten to know very well over the last, Topeka for years and Cynthia over the last 6 months. And I want to tell a story that I think articulates exactly why these two women are sitting up here together. So so I met Cynthia Hughes 6 months ago, and Cynthia, well, let me start the other way. I meet Topeka, and I'm sitting to pick her up outside of the DOJ. She's in the DOJ to advocate for restitution for about 25 women. And she's walking out, and these women just burst out of the DOJ. They'd all just been meeting in Ed Martin's office, talking about restitution, and I think what you spoke about was this kind of life sentence of people getting out of prison, but saddled with restitution of millions of dollars. And all these women burst out, and then out comes Topeka, and all the women go, okay, Topeka, where do we go next? I need you to change my hotel. Do you think we're going to get restitution lifted off? All questions fired at Topeka at once, and you could really see, here is this woman who's gathered all these women who otherwise don't know each other, whose lives have been destroyed by the justice system, and she has brought them together, created the whole event for them to get together, and then created all of the relationships that she would need to be able to get an audience with someone like Ed Martin to explain this problem of restitution that we understand is now being discussed at really kind of at the highest levels. And that's who Topeka is. She does all of that on her own. So then we met Cynthia Hughes, and Cynthia Hughes, we met Cynthia Hughes about 6 months ago, and Cynthia Hughes explained to me what I didn't know about what she'd done during J6. And what she'd done during January 6th is her nephew was unjustly treated by the Department of Justice. I think he spent about 3 years in solitary confinement. And Cynthia was so outraged by this that not only did she line up the resources for her nephew, Tim, to have criminal defense, she lined up resources. She ended up raising, I think, 6 or maybe 7 figures to get criminal defense for tens of J6 defendants who she didn't know. So then we're going, and I, fast forward, there's an event at Trump National about 2 months ago, and Cynthia brings all the J6 families to this event,
and we're sitting in the lobby of the hotel room, and she's saying, you're all gonna start coming this evening, it's gonna be so fun, you have to be here, she ordered pizza. And one by one, I see all these J6 defendants and their families trickle in, and they say, Cynthia, do you have my hotel confirmation number? Cynthia, when are we gonna get the last of the pardons? Cynthia, my flight was late, can you make sure it's on time on the way back? And it was this moment of recognition of, wait, I've met that woman before in a different body, in a different scene, maybe coming from a different political part of the world, but doing the exact same thing for people who they otherwise have no obligation and no business needing to help, but simply because it's the right thing to do. And so these two women are like mirror images of each other. They're forces of nature who bring together rooms like this wherever they go, traveling around the country, and here they are sitting together, talking in person, what I think is for the first time. So I think it's a very exciting moment, and just so happy to have you guys here to hear how each of you do what you do in your respective worlds towards the same purpose of justice and people being treated fairly. So,
Well, Marcus, thank you for bringing us together.
Sure, that's what Marcus does.
Yeah.
So, where will I start? Well, I will start saying, well, thank you for creating this space and for inviting me into it. This was so important to me, so much so. A little fun fact. I was on Nantucket this weekend for the Christmas stroll. Took a ferry at 7:40 this morning to get on the plane to get here and came straight here off the plane. So that's how important this was to me. That I traveled all the way here to be here because these conversations are so necessary. So just a little bit about my background, which is landing me here. I am a New Yorker, born and raised, grew up in Manorville in Long Island. Parents were franchise business owners, restaurateurs, had every single thing. We were raised, the only Black family raised in our neighborhood out there. My parents wanted us to have what money could buy, and so they did that. When it was time for me to go to college, I decided I wanted to go to an HBCU because I wanted to be around other kids that looked like me. And I chose Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, which was now another culture shift for me. And now I'm trying to find a sense of connectedness or belonging. And so here I am in Baltimore and, happy, thinking I'm finding my community, and folks are like, oh, you talk like you're white, or, you're pretty to be dark skinned. And I started to learn about colorism and things that were happening within even my own community, thinking I would be accepted just because I was Black, but that wasn't necessarily the case. And so as I'm trying to find myself, I'm now dating guys who were selling drugs. Then I thought that I was smarter, I'm an entrepreneur and I can do this better. And then I found myself selling drugs all while going to college, became division chairperson for Amtrak for New York and DC. And I had all these different lives going on until one day I find myself arrested. There's, of course, a mini doc happening, so you'll hear the story later. It's a lot of things in between. But nonetheless, I'm arrested, I'm thrown in the county jail in Virginia, and thinking, no problem, I'll bail out, because it was a federal drug conspiracy charge, it was jurisdictional entrapment, there were actually no drugs, there was a conversation about it, and then I find myself being charged with selling 80 kilos of cocaine, and there was no cocaine. So I start learning about what was happening. First, I thought I was getting out on bail. So family, friends, everybody's there, deeds to homes, money, whatever they needed. And the judge was like, no, you're a drug queen and a threat to society, no bail. And so now I'm sitting in this county jail in Virginia and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna keep fighting. And my lawyer's like, well, no, you're gonna be here. And so, you better get used to it. And I began to learn more about what was happening in this now new community that I'm a part of, which is the prison. And so as I started talking to some of the women there and learning more about their stories, I originally thought that people use drugs because they wanted to. It was a choice that you made. I didn't use drugs. And so somebody did it because they wanted to. And I went to an NA class and I asked the lady in the class, well, why did you use drugs? It's all these campaigns that say don't use drugs, just say no. And she was like, my father was raping me and gave me heroin for the first time and told me to take it so the pain would go away. It was these stories after story. And it didn't matter if they were black, white, brown, orange, green. It was the same story: low socioeconomic background, low levels of education, no access to opportunity, and just really railroaded by the system, being criminalized for substance abuse, mental health issues, and incarcerated. And so I think, I'm getting sentenced. I decided to plead out. I had a spiritual awakening. And I'm like, all right, well, I did 11 months now pre-trial. They'll let me out, Why? It was no drugs, right? And the judge was like, you come from a fine family. You should have known better. 10 years and 10 months in federal prison. And so I get to the feds now, and much of the same that I'm learning around the issues that were happening with women. And so, now women were very educated, high socioeconomic backgrounds, but the same underlying issues. And one night, God woke me up and told me I would start this organization called Ladies of Hope Ministries, and I would do two things: create platforms for women to use their voice to share their story, and also housing opportunities for women to be able to come home and don't feel a need to be back out in the street or subjected to violence again. And so, as God would have it, I was released in 2015, came home, hit the ground running, started creating platforms, built my organization. We have programs running in 34 states, 5 prison systems, housing in 5 states for women, girls coming home from prison, jail, actively fleeing domestic violence and incarceration. From speaking publicly everywhere and doing similar platforms, but we did them at law schools, really elevating what was happening with women in incarceration. We began to bring in women from inside a federal prison to share their stories. And this is kind of how building the platforms of people telling their stories. I heard you, we were watching in the car on the way here, but telling their stories and why it's important for people to understand. And so Alice Johnson was one of the people who was telling her story. We were able to bring her around. I said she was on tour with us at all these different law schools, from Yale to UW to everywhere. And we did a video with Mike.com and went viral. Kim Kardashian saw the video, hence Alice It's Out. President Trump gets her out of prison. And before that, we had did a criminal justice reform summit under the first Trump administration. And I wasn't gonna go. I mean, obviously, I'm a Black woman, and everybody in my community was saying, you cannot go. This is political suicide. I'm like, well, who said I was gonna run for anything anyway, I'm just trying to get people free. I don't care who is in the administration, that it's important for us to work with everyone. And President Trump was listening. And so we were there. I was invited to speak on a panel with Jared Kushner, Brooke Rollins, Jessica Jackson, Van Jones, and I think Rick Perry, maybe, I believe. And I began to tell my story of being incarcerated, the things that I experienced with healthcare and incarceration, and people were crying, and it was a standing ovation. And that's when we had these little pins that said "Free Alice Johnson" on them. And Jared saw it and said, "Who is that?" And I told him, and that's how the First Step Act really started. And so we worked hard, and we advocated, and we brought women inside that looked like everyone, that spoke like everyone, but that knew that we needed to go in there. And we were attacked terribly by our colleagues because they did not understand. But what we knew was that it took every single person to get us here, that it's going to take every single person to get us away from here. And so President Trump signed the bill. I was blessed and fortunate enough to be in the Oval Office when the bill was signed. And as fate would have it, I'm sending all these letters of support for people to get a pardon, and then I get a phone call that I received a full and unconditional presidential pardon. So for us, going into the next administration now, after President Trump's first administration, we're thinking, okay, we've started all this great work, and now we're going to be able to kind of pick the ball up and keep it moving. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. We couldn't really get anything done. We tried everything we could, but it didn't happen. We worked with the pardon attorney at the time, introduced restitution and remission to her, so much so that they changed the application on the DOJ website to put in the recommendations that we said. And now we hear everything that's happening around the attacks around restitution, and we think it's outrageous Because here is an administration that actually helped us, that listened to us. We filed the 27 applications for remission and restitution through that administration. Now they sat like many others. But here we were fortunate enough to get with now the new U.S. Department Attorney, Ed Martin, who didn't invite just 5 women in like the last administration, but invited all 30 women into the Department of Justice to have a conversation and to really learn about what we were talking about. And I mean, literally, I visited him last week and asked more questions and wanted to know like what we can do. And so for me, I'm here because it is important for these conversations to be raised and elevated in a way that is talking about all of us. Because so often when you see or you hear about January 6th as an isolated event, people think it's just a certain type of person, a certain type of issue. But when you put me on the phone with one of those sisters from January 6th, and she had the same issues that many of the sisters that I work with every single day have, we found that there was more alignment than there was things that were different. And so, yeah. And so clearly you see I can talk. I'm not going to take up any more time because I know you have things to say. But I appreciate all the panels. I had an opportunity to hear what I could from the airport, and then while I was standing in the back where there needs to be so much structural change. But you know, I think the one law that everyone is fighting for is around the conspiracy law. It looks the same, whether and what any type of crime, any type of you want to use weaponization as the term, it is used, and it doesn't have to. Nothing. Half of the time, it's not true. You know, one person can say you did a thing, and another person comes in, and the next thing you know, you're in prison. And please go, because I'll keep talking like I'm the only one up here. Because now I got a lot to say.
Yeah,
Go ahead, thank you.
I'm with you.
Yes.
I wish we had. I think the first time I met you was at our, kind of like our soft launch in DC.
Mhm.
And you were able to come in for, you know, just a short time. And I think when you heard some of what we were discussing in terms of January 6th, I think if it's appropriate to say, maybe threw you for a loop, because you're right. January 6th, people hear January 6th and immediately they think violence, and they think, you know, overthrowing the government, and they think all these negative things. And what they don't know is there were 1,700 people that were caught up in January 6th. And of that number, there were a few people that went a little rogue that day. And the media has hyped up that, you know, that narrative and those images and the videos, and everybody got lumped into the same basket. And I don't know if if you heard Enrique speaking before, but I mean, Enrique, it was heartbreaking the day he got sentenced. I literally had to leave there was a ton of people there to sentencing. And I didn't go I was in the courthouse that day, and his mother, it was heartbreaking to sentence a man to prison for 22 years when he didn't even have participation in the events of that day. But it didn't start there with me. It started with, my nephew, Tim. And Tim is a very private person, so I want to be respectful of him and be careful here. But Tim's been in my life since he's an infant, a baby. He's a very strong person, and very, very smart, and very empowered himself. And he went to, hear his president speak. He was, he loves President Trump. At that time, he was in the Army 12 years, and he went to the Capitol that day in a suit and tie, and he had his MAGA hat on, and he did go in the building. He was in the building for about 29 minutes. He went down to what they call the crypt, and literally, he's on video acting like, just a fool. He's dancing around, and he's looking at the artwork, and he's like a historian, Tim. And for that, they threw him in jail in solitary confinement for a full year, 23 hours a day in a jail cell. And by like the second month of that, I really had enough. So I grew up in a household, my father was a juvenile detective. And my mother was, let me bake the cake and let me, do this and that in the kitchen. And so we lived in a little shore town in New Jersey, and my father would always bring home the kids from the neighborhood. These kids that came from broken homes, or, their parents had a domestic violence, situation, and, or even the bad kids. My father, and he was always buying bicycles, and he'd be Santa Claus, and he'd basketballs, and just, I come by it very honestly, and he'd bring these kids home. My mother would welcome them in, hug them, love them. And, that's who I've become. I emulate my wonderful and amazing father. And so, so this was this was easy for me. And Tim has been in my life, since he's a child, and he's had his own fair share of problems, in his home life with his parents. And so, I've always shown up for Tim. I've always been there for Tim, and this was going to be no different. I didn't care about January 6th. I just, when I got the phone call the morning that he was arrested, I was in shock, because this is a good kid. Goes to work, goes to school, helps others in the community, serving his country, and now he's in jail. And I was like blown away. And so Tim being on the inside and me being on the outside, of course, I went on a mission. I didn't want him in solitary confinement. The worst public defender, or public pretender, as I call them, the worst public defender. And you couldn't have a conversation with this lawyer without it involving his distaste for the president. And so several times I had to tell him, shut up about the president. We're not here to talk about the president. We're here to talk about Tim and what Tim is being accused of. So, while I was fighting for Tim, I was learning through Tim of all these people he was in jail with. And Tim isn't married. Tim doesn't have children. And I was learning about all these people he was in jail with who had wives, who had children. And it was like Father's Day or something in 2021, very early on in January 6th. And so I hadn't talked to Tim for like a few days, and he called me, and I'm like, bro, you haven't called. Like, what's going on, And he's like, I don't have children. I don't have a wife. I don't need to be on the phone with you. And he's right. He's right about that. And he tells me a story, and this isn't like Tim. Tim is very hard exterior, and he says, there was a guy that he was in jail with, and he overheard the conversation, or the gentleman might have told him, where he was talking to his young children, and the one child said to his father, I can't remember what your face looks like. That was it for me. That was it for me.
Yeah.
What do we do? I went and talked to some people, the few people that were talking about in the media. What do I do? Tell me what to do. And this person said, organize. You have to organize. You have to organize these families, get with the families out here. And the light bulb went off, because that's where I'm effective, right? I know, I didn't have the greatest upbringing. I had some troubles in my life, and so I just know how to be effective in that space. So I put together family support groups. There was no Patriot Freedom Project yet. It was just family support groups over Zoom. A place where these families could go and connect and find support, because only those people going through it understood. And next thing I knew, I was talking to the great Dinesh D'Souza and his beautiful wife, Debbie, on the phone. And they said, we heard that you're bringing these families together, and we heard that you're doing these support calls, where you're doing this, and we want to help you. And I received a check for over $100,000 a few days later. And he said, I want you, we were coming up on like Halloween and everything. He said, I want you to help these children, back to school, Halloween costumes, sneakers, backpacks, whatever. And I jumped right into action. And then, people started to learn, and then more people started coming out of the woodwork. And you started to see and learn just how catastrophic the humanitarian side of January 6th was. And that's where I decided to put my energy. There's not enough in this country, in my opinion, because, of course, let me back up out of this, as you and I have already discussed. I have gotten a ton of letters from people in jails now, not related to January 6th, who are begging for mercy. Please help me. Please have somebody look at my case. Please have somebody look at my sentence, please, because maybe they're overcharged, maybe they're over-sentenced, and there's so much of that, and that's what we're learning now.
Yeah.
That's what we're learning now. And I don't think there's enough in the prisons. I don't think there's enough, places to go for people who've never been in trouble before, or people who have just gotten in trouble for the first time, and it's a doozy, And what do we do about that? What do we do with a 17 or 18-year-old boy who doesn't have family support at home, who doesn't have somebody to give him commissary, who doesn't have somebody to give her, help, because she's a female and she requires a little bit more than a man does, Where do we go? And there's really nothing out here. There's nothing really out here. You have all these different organizations. I saw a tweet the other day from Crew. Crew? So Crew's an organization in DC, very, very, very left-leaning, very anti-Trump. They hate the president, and they hate anybody that supports him, and they hate anybody that has a spine and stands up for what they think is injustice. And they don't want to talk about how flashbangs were being thrown through children's bedroom windows during these crazy violent raids at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and children were waking up to these loud flashbangs at their bedside. And that is the truth. That was really going on. We have a family in Florida who the feds showed up and surrounded his farm. The videos are insane. And he has like a compound. It's a big, big farm, and, he's got a lot of children, and some live one was building a house on the property, and so she was living in, a trailer till her home was done, and there's his grandchildren. And the flashbangs, the amount of flashbangs, this man's bathroom caught on fire. His daughter with her children were crawling through smoke on the ground just to get away from, what I call carnage. So I just, I don't know, I don't think that we have enough going on. And when I look at organizations like Crew, and I see that they're not concerned with that they're not concerned with a child, whether the child's parents made a poor choice or a bad mistake, that is not the fault of a child. We cannot burden children and put that on their shoulders, right? So when you have an organization like Crew who's not concerned with children and how children are managing and getting by, their dad's in prison, their mother is now working 2 or 3 jobs, and these women, 5 years later, they're overworked. Okay, they're still overworked because these men can't find jobs since they've been released, since they got pardoned. And Crew is putting out a FOIA request because they want to know who's filing lawsuits against the DOJ from January 6th. They want to know who the Doug Mackeys are in this world that are filing lawsuits. It's maddening. It's maddening, and we're so like this in this country, and there's not many people like you and I, Topeka, that are in the middle saying, okay, where's the resolution from both sides? I don't agree with everything on the right side. I don't agree with everything, in DC, and neither do you, and we come from it from different perspectives. So where do we meet in the middle, and how do we get the message out to people? We do it like this.
That's right.
So.
Oh, well, I have someone here. She's looking at me like, what? So there's actually 2 women here. I know you heard from Tanya already, but Jackie also Arena, who is here as well. And I met Jackie online, really. She reached out and she could share a little bit about her story, but with her grandfather, Victor Arena, who has been in over 30 years, 34 years, over 90 years old, dementia, blind, has Alzheimer's, and my father passed from Alzheimer's, so I'm really passionate about that. But we've been doing everything to try to get him out too, and clemency. We try compassionate release. But please, I believe in not telling anyone's story, especially when they're in the room. Share a little bit about, where you are, and as a child, the things that you saw growing up, and how, the feds came and knocked on your door and kicked, and the things that you saw that's re-traumatizing over and over again.
Since I was like 9 years old, I was dealing with it. I think my father and my grandfather both incarcerated. My grandfather went first, and he was given over 100 years for a conspiracy case. And it turns out by the time my dad's case came, they found that there was so much corruption. There was a lot of evidence withheld by prosecutors in the Eastern District of New York. And my father was acquitted, along with 19 other men. And I've been fighting for 34 years to get my grandfather a retrial. Now his health is declined, so it's at the point where you don't know what to do. You file for compassionate release and they deny it, and they say based on the crimes or the severity of the crimes, but he was never given a fair chance to really look at a lot of the issues. And the prosecutors, actually judges, have spoken on the corruption. They've, outed them plenty of times in different articles, saying that it was outrageous misconduct and their relationships and the things they withheld were wrong, and you still can't get, it looked at again. So for 34 years we've been fighting that, and now since his decline in health at 91, he's blind, he has dementia, he doesn't even know where he is. I'm still fighting to try to get him home. And, it's frustrating because you can't talk about the corruption and you can't talk about his health, you just don't get an answer. And it's hard to have a voice because there's not many people listening. They just put them in a box because it's automatically you're a criminal if you were convicted of a crime. So it's been a very tough space, but that's why I'm here. I don't really talk about it publicly, so excuse my shakiness, but I appreciate everything you've been doing for me and giving me a voice, so.
Jackie and I, we actually met in the bathroom today. But I was already very familiar with what was going on with Jackie's grandfather, and so I think a lot of what I said here today about those families resonates with you. But here's my thing that I want to say. That's another big issue we don't talk about, right? How failing the prison systems are. Oh my God, it is, I mean, I've learned so much over these 5 years watching these jury in DC. No, if you're on the right side and you get in trouble in DC and you go to a jury, you're just be prepared to lose. You're not going to win. There's nothing fair about a jury selection or a jury trial in DC, but that's another conversation for another day. But the prison systems themselves, I think, it's kind of like a fine line, right? I grew up in a police home. I'm married to a cop. I've been around police. It's a fine line, and I get it. But there's something called compassion. I've seen my husband in action. I've seen my father in action. They have a lot of compassion for people, right? Especially my father. And I think that some of these guards, they forget compassion. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of these, top max, security max, they probably give these guards a serious run for their money. But that's not the majority.
No, and I actually I was at Bedford Hills a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Here in New York, Women's Correctional Facility, and there was a new officer there. And I was just having a conversation with the commissioner about bringing new programming in there. And I just was like, it was so much over testosterone, right? I'm like, you're in a woman's facility. And he was like, well, they wanted me to come here to give some order. And I'm like, but why? Usually you don't just get moved to the women's prison unless you did something in the old prison, So what did you do that has you here now? But it was just so fascinating because just his own personal beliefs around it. I'm like, one, he's not going to be there. And there was some of the other officers there that thanked me for even speaking up to him because they almost seemed like they were in fear of what he would do in that institution. But outside of that, to your point, I've had the opportunity to visit prisons and jails all over the world. And, the system here is not one that is made to heal. It's punitive.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that you can hold people accountable while healing them. It does not look like our system today. It just doesn't. And do people need a timeout sometimes? 100%, kind of like you said. You know, we don't have the infrastructure here in order to do that, which is why you throw people in prison, whether it's for mental health issues, extreme poverty, all, you know, weaponization, and other crimes.
Yeah.
But I think this conversation and bringing different communities together in order to talk about these things are critical, because that's when things change and that's when power really happens.
Yeah.
When you're having them separate in different places, you can't, it's always gonna be this left-right, you know, this
Yeah.
white-black, that's, you know, up-down. When you bring people together, you can really talk about the things that where you agree, and even if you can respectfully communicate and disagree about things. You know, I tell
Yes.
people all the time, I don't always agree with my mom on everything, you know? So going into this administration, I actually felt, honestly, around this particular issue, more welcomed and heard than I had in a Democratic one. So for me, it was like, all right, well, if I can get stuff done here, because when I go and visit prisons all over the country, people inside don't care who the president is. They want to be free. So they're just like, please, yeah, go. If you don't go, there's no representation of us, right? If you're not at the table, then no one can talk about what's happening in prisons. If we didn't go and speak during the first administration, then the elected officials would not have heard some of the experiences of a real person in real time, right? To want to make change and difference. So I think right now we're at a really unique time because we do have a president who frankly just, you know, is going to do what he wants to do, and I'm okay with that. What I've said is that I feel like someone asked me recently the other day about some of the pardons that have been given out. And how do I feel? Well, first, you know, I'm grateful because my husband got clemency in May. So, you know, thank God for that. So, you know, I have no harm, no, whatever. I feel like, yes, there's big fish, right? That we see that are getting out. And people are like, well, how do you feel about that? I'm happy to see that it is still moving, you know, but just like there's some sharks that get out, we want to also see goldfish too, right? So like for every one big fish, you can have 10 little fish, right? How do we bring it all together so that we're actually, you know, a person like you and I who may not have the advocate, to your point, you know, but is just as deserving as the person that does. A person who does not have the resources that the person who does have, at least there's an opportunity if you try to do something systemic across the board. If you attack something and say, all right, well, let's challenge conspiracy laws. Let's make some of the issues that we were able to raise in the First Step Act retroactive, so that while, yes, people are being sentenced differently now, what about all the people that are still sitting in that had they been sentenced today would not be still in prison? So I think that there's things that this particular administration can and will do once they know what to do. And I think that they're open to listening to it in ways that we haven't seen it before.
I agree. We're getting this.
Oh, so we got the
We're
5 second.
we're getting this.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for us? We'll wrap it up.
Yes. Topeka, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
an incredible day. I'm the owner and CEO of a spiritual organization named One Piece, which I think you've heard about today. Both the founder and the director of sales, Nicole Dayton and Rachel Turwitz, are currently facing 24 to 30 years in prison for teaching a meditation practice that changed my life. Tens of thousands of people came into One Case and had incredible experiences, and multiple scientists studied the practice and saw that it could heal trauma. But because we teach about female power, and because we teach a practice that involves sexuality, and because we say that women are not inherently victims, and that challenging circumstances can make you a more resilient person, individual in the world, woke me to prosecutors, attacked my friends, and convicted them, and they currently have been incarcerated for the past 7 months in Brooklyn. They bent every rule in the book to put them in prison no matter what. And so I'll give you a couple, and many of these, everyone in the room, I think, with has had a case. We met Doug Mackey, I think, over a year ago, who actually introduced us to Cynthia. And he was one of the first conspiracy cases that we'd encountered the same as ours. So the Biden DOJ charged them with forced labor conspiracy, which again, no underlying crime, it's a victimless crime. The prosecutors, I think you heard One Case and Nicole's attorney John talk about the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and how it's being used far beyond its scope in this case and in others. And with our case especially, they've taken what are these salacious allegations and they've used it to distract from the fact that it's an unconstitutional use of the statute. Each witness that testified in our case, there were 9 of them, you heard from John, all talked about basically regretting their experience 10 years later. And then the government is calling that trafficking. 5 months before the indictment of Nicole and Rachel, Netflix put out a true crime movie using a fabricated diary read aloud by a government witness that was created in collaboration with the film's producer. And 18 months later, the prosecutors had to admit that the evidence was fake and dropped it. But the case continued on and they went to trial. The lead case agent used stolen attorney-client privilege information, mishandled evidence, and encouraged witnesses to destroy chain of custody. We've been debanked over 73 times from 21 institutions, including employees of mine, their own family members. Someone's mother was debanked from her personal account. 2 witnesses came forward during the process saying they were pressured by the FBI into saying that they were victims. One of the defendants, Rachel, who refused to turn victim, was arrested at gunpoint at 7 a.m. at the place where she lived in Northern California with 10 SUVs and helicopters. And so now my 2 friends who you heard today have been sitting in prison for 7 months because we chose to fight back and have been willing to bring these tactics to light. When I first bought One Case in 2017, before the hit pieces, before the media, before the FBI probe, before the 5-year investigation, I would have never imagined this was possible. And since I met Cynthia and everyone in this room, I've learned how every case, it's all the same tactics. And I want to thank John Morrow. He was the first one who saw that this was a case of an ideological weaponization, and was able to hear what we were actually saying. And Cynthia, who is a rare person in the world, who really fights for the people, and there's no one out there that I've seen. And she made a commitment that she would stand with every single person until there's justice, and I and my team had made a similar commitment. So it's not enough just for Nicole and Rachel to get out, but there has to be a change that we have in the system. Thank you.
Bear with me, I'm trying to hold it together.
Cindy is here tonight. Unfortunately, we got in bad circumstances. My youngest son started to bring home her other nephew. And we became close friends since then, due to tragic events. And ever since then, we've been in and out of touch with each other, but as of recently, she's become a dear part of my life. July 4th for most people is a great day of celebration. Unfortunately, it's become a tragic event for my family. My oldest son, Scott, he served in the Army National Guard and is a corrections officer in the state of Colorado for the Colorado Women's Prison. July 4th, him and his then fiance were coming home from work, and she got into an argument with a neighbor in reference to a minor child setting off fireworks. Not going into my son's apartment window. My son and her proceeded up into the apartment and got their dogs to go out for a walk. And as the girlfriend proceeded down, there was a verbal exchange between the child's mother and her. My son came down behind her and tried to break up the argument. She turned the argument from the girlfriend to my son. It's dark, it's 4th of July, my son couldn't say anything. She was coming at my son with her hand raised. My son, self-defense mode, being in the military, as you're aware, defend yourself, stay your ground, and making any corrections, he pulled his weapon to his chest and said, back up. He didn't know what she had. As she got closer, my son saw it was a glass globe, so he reholstered his weapon and said, stand back, I don't want to argue, I just want to walk my dog. She proceeded to hit my son with the globe. My son's now bleeding, and now there's an altercation, screaming and arguing. One of the children run to the apartment and get boyfriend. This is all on video from this point. You see the boyfriend walking down the walkway, takes his glasses off, proceeds to my son, and hits my son, throws his body into my son, and reaches for his weapon. My son is licensed to carry. He feels the handle of his weapon, so he pulls the weapon in self-defense, fires one shot. Unfortunately, the gentleman was killed. My son attempted to give CPR, they wouldn't allow my son near him. My son did not flee the scene, he did not run, he's never been in trouble with the law. He said everything he possibly could. He heard the sirens coming, he walked towards the sirens. They arrested my son. The officer told my son, don't say anything, don't speak, don't say a word. We're just gonna take care of it. My son was charged with second-degree murder. He is currently, December 16th, will be 4 years, up to 37% at the sentencing. The judge looked at the mother and said, how old is your son? When he passed, 37. Turned to my son and said, you now have 37 years ago. The footage was not allowed to be shown. Only pieces of the footage were pulled out. On the full recording, you can hear the woman saying, kill the effing cop. But it didn't matter. It wasn't allowed to be shown. The original attorney my son had went to the judge and tried to lie and say that my son could no longer afford to pay him. My son said that the lie, Your Honor, I've got the receipts to prove paying him. It turns out that the attorney he had has been brought up on several charges for misconduct, and he was eventually disbarred and released from my son's case. With COVID and everything going on, all the postponements and everything, we're now years out. It happened in 19, he didn't go in front of the judge for trial until 2021. He went in front of the judge, prepared for trial, and the judge said, well, you need a lawyer. And he said, Your Honor, I don't have the funds. Multiple times he applied for public defenders, multiple times he was denied. The judge gave him a list of attorneys that were slow or low pay. Every attorney on a 5-page list was either deceased, disbarred, or no longer with the firm. He went back in front of the judge, and the judge said, that's not my problem. This family's waited long enough for their trial. we're going to trial, you're gonna have to defend yourself. So 6 months before my son's trial date, we were able to find an attorney, Bo Worthington, to take on my son's case, pretty much pro bono. He did everything he possibly could, pled with the courts to get assistance for investigators, for more time, everything. 30 days before my son's trial date, the judge gave him state funds to be able to get an investigator to find the witnesses that are now 4 years down the road. And there was nothing we could do. My son has been model inmate, unfortunately. He just turned 33. And he's now looking to spend the rest of his life in jail. We have filed every appeal we possibly can. The public defender that he has at the appellate level has just filed the 35B, which from what I understand, and I apologize for my ignorance on the laws, is for requests for resentencing, to lower his sentencing, if I'm not mistaken. And she told him to file a 35C against every attorney who's touched his case, because he did not do anything wrong. This should have clearly been a self-defense case. And he has been thrown under the bus. Now, the gentleman, unfortunately, had previous arrest records in multiple states, and we were not allowed to bring it up in the courts. The judge's exact words were, he's not on trial anymore. He fled the state of Florida and the state of, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Tennessee and another state, because if he got arrested again, he was going to jail for life. So now my son is sitting in jail for the rest of his life on a simple self-defense case that was all on video that we can watch. Cynthia found out what was going on and reached out to me instantly, and she's been a rock. She has been there by my side and helped me through all of this to this day, and she still continues. Even though my son's case is more at a state level, she's been there to help me. She's introduced me to Martha. Martha has told me multiple times, send me your case, I'll see what I can do. I just sent it to her for her and her husband to review. This isn't anything her should have to go through. So to see it on a federal level, to weaponizing things down to the state level, to weaponizing it. Somebody who's defended their country and wants to continue defending it gets out. He wants to fight for it. It's sad and it's sickening to go through. Never would I think this is something that would happen in this world, but unfortunately, this is where we are. And these tragic series of events of what Martha's family is going through and the other families are going through, this is what has to bring us together instead of the joy of living free in today's society. Thank you.
Do I need to turn this on? No? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Supposed to say good afternoon. My name is Ron Elfenbein, and I am the victim of lawfare on the federal level. I'm an emergency room doctor, and Mike Crispy said earlier, he said, it's time for people to stand up and do the right thing. Well, when COVID hit, that's exactly what I did. A lot of my friends, a lot of people that I knew, a lot of people in other professions chose to hide. I stepped up and I saw what was coming, so I ordered all the PPE I could. I started donating PPE. I had a friend of mine in this city, actually, Columbia University. He's a cardiologist. He was called into the ICU. He was wearing a trash bag because they didn't have any PPE. So I sent mountains of PPE that I had paid for with my own money to people that I knew and people I didn't know all across the country to try to help out. I became very active with the monoclonal antibodies when they came about. I don't know if you know what they are, but they basically were the cure for COVID, essentially. Unheard of in medicine, the efficacy that these things had, but they really were the cure for COVID. So we actually became, I owned an urgent care center at the time, and we became the largest testing center in the state of Maryland. We went from 1 site to 8 very, very quickly. And we actually became the largest suppliers or users of monoclonal antibodies, bigger than Johns Hopkins, bigger than the University of Maryland. So the state was allocating a large sum of their allocation to my facilities. And I went on TV, I was on Fox News, I was on Breitbart, I was on Sky News, I was on Newsmax, pretty much every week, and actually even CBS and ABC, talking about the monoclonals and how wonderful they were and how they were such a great cure for COVID. And then the Biden administration, very stupidly in 2021, at the end of 2021, decided to cancel the monoclonals. They basically put them on hold because they said, well, the data shows that the Omicron variant is resistant to the monoclonals, and once the threshold of 70% prevalence is reached, they don't work anymore. So we're just going to stop it completely. And I went on Fox News and I said, not only is this ridiculous and stupid and taking away people's choice, but they're misreading all the data. They're using outdated models that don't work, that have been wrong every single time they've looked at them for everything, and they're completely wrong, and I said people are going to die. Turns out, 2 weeks later, I was right. The Biden administration came back and said, to their credit, they said, we were wrong by a factor of 50%. Instead of the prevalence being 70%, it was 20%. So they reinstated the program, and everything kind of went along. 4 months later, out of the blue, no warning, no letter, no phone call, nothing, I find myself the victim of an indictment on federal healthcare charges, federal healthcare fraud charges. Now, I don't know how much you know about coding and billing in medicine, but when you submit a claim to an insurance company, Medicare or a private insurance company, you don't actually submit the chart. You just submit a claim. Now, in order for them to say that I committed fraud, and first of all, I didn't see any of these patients. I was the medical director. I wasn't working there clinically. I didn't see anybody. I didn't do anything. I was just the medical director. But in order for you to say that you're committing fraud, that you're upcoding the charges, you have to look at the charts, right, to know what was done. They didn't subpoena a single chart. And I know for a fact they didn't see the charts because I was the only one that had access to them. They subpoenaed them after they criminally charged me with a crime. So just imagine waking up one day, you're a person who's trying to do the right thing. I mean, I was in nursing homes when the state mandated this, multiple states mandated the nursing homes had to get tested. The federal government wasn't doing that. The state governments weren't doing that. The county governments weren't doing that. I was there. I was risking my life. I come home every day, taking off my clothes, washing myself before I'd hug my kids. It was really scary, if you remember that time. And waking up one day to find yourself the victim of a crime. You never done anything wrong your entire life. I have 4 children. The youngest was 3 at the time. And Martha talked about the impact on the families. I can't even describe it. So 4 kids. All 3 of them had to go into therapy. One of them, she was 12 at the time, she couldn't sleep. So she slept with me every single night. She would not leave my bed for an entire year. Now, I couldn't sleep. I lost weight. I was a wreck. I was miserable. I couldn't work. I withdrew from everything. I was almost suicidal. I've never been like that in my entire life, but that's where I was. To this day, they're still messed up. The only one who was spared was my youngest, who was 3 at the time. He had no idea what was going on. I got debanked. I was a member of, my father was in the Air Force. He proudly served. USAA, I've been a member of USAA my entire life. They sent me a letter, take your money and go. We don't want to talk to you anymore. Truist Bank, American Express, I've been a member my entire life, take your money and go. I mean, the list goes, my TSA pre-check was revoked. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? I had to return I had a rifle, couldn't have it in my house. Never even fired the damn thing, ever. But I have a rifle, I had to give it up. My lawyer said to me, there's 2 types of people that go to trial, crazy people and innocent people. And he's like, you're not crazy. And I said, no, you're right, I'm not crazy and I'm innocent. So I took it to trial because I kept thinking to myself, how could anybody find me guilty? I didn't do anything wrong. And, people talk today about the system being rigged, and it completely is. The system is designed for you to either plea or go to jail. That's it. That's why they have a 99 point whatever it is % conviction rate, because everybody either pleads or they can cheat, they can lie, they can steal, do whatever they have to do to get you to go to jail. That's the system that we live with. So I went to trial, and the government never offered any proof of anything. And in fact, it was so awful that at closing, at the first day of trial, their quote unquote expert witness gets up there, and the government said, my lawyer completely eviscerated him. He had no idea what he was talking about any coding, anything. So it was so bad, the judge actually pushed the jury out of the room, called us up to the bench, and said to the government, what the hell are you doing? Those were his exact words. What the hell are you doing? Where is the crime? What are you doing here? And then, oh, well, you'll see, judge, we have more stuff. You better show me something quick, because otherwise I'm going to throw this whole case out. And unfortunately, he did not throw the whole case out. It was a 4-week trial. They found me guilty because at the day of the closing, the chief lawyer for the government actually said to the jury, he said, you might be asking yourself, what is the right code to be using here? Well, the good news is you don't have to know. You just have to know Dr. Elfenbein is wrong and he's a criminal. Those were his exact words. I faced 50 years in jail and millions of dollars in restitution. And I'm Jewish, but I think I got the best Christmas present of my life that year because the judge, who was the chief judge of the state of Maryland, wrote a 93-page opinion and got it out 2 days before Christmas that tore the government completely a new you-know-what and said, you should never have brought this case. This is a travesty. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but a travesty of justice. This is terrible. You have no case. This is ridiculous, basically. And he acquitted me. Not only did he acquit me, he granted a Rule 30 and a Rule 20. Is it a Rule 33 and Rule 29? Yeah. So not only did he acquit me, but he said, in case the government appeals this, you're guaranteed a new trial. In 93 pages. So the government, of course, thank you. And the whole time before this, I'm thinking, my God, first of all, my father was dying slowly. I had to deal with that. So I'm facing 50 years in jail before I got this, this acquittal. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, I have a 3-year-old. I'm going to miss his first day of kindergarten. I'm going to miss his first day of nursery school, of first grade. I'm going to miss all these bar and bat mitzvahs. I'm going to miss their weddings. I'm going to miss their first day of college. For doing nothing, right? For doing the right thing, stepping up and doing the right thing. But the judge acquitted me, and the Biden administration decided to appeal it right before Trump was inaugurated. We went before the Fourth Circuit, and the judge, by the way, was the same judge who called the Trump prosecutor against Comey a puppet. And the judge who acquitted me, by the way, was a Biden appointee, just to put that out there. I know they're not supposed to be political, but he was an Obama appointee, not even a Biden, Obama appointee. This judge in the Fourth Circuit basically said, now, I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I understand there's 2 elements of a crime: falsity, that there's actual crime, and intent. The Fourth Circuit basically came out and said, well, we don't have to prove falsity, meaning we don't have to prove there actually was a crime. That would be like saying, I called my friend and said, I'm going to go rob the bank tomorrow, but I don't actually rob the bank, and then they throw me in jail because I told someone I was going to rob the bank. Makes no sense whatsoever. Plus, they got a ton of things factually wrong. We tried to argue to say, can we rehear this? And they said no. So now I face the prospect of a new trial in August. Lucky me. It cost me $2.5 million to defend myself that I did not have the first time. I don't know how I'm going to defend myself the second time. Basically, this entire thing like I said, it probably took 10 years off my life, I'm sure. It bankrupted me, costing me my business, my reputation, which was stellar before all this. It's nearly impossible to go back to work because now hospitals and groups look at me and say, well, you're damaged goods, there's something wrong with you, we don't want you to work for us. Luckily, I did get back to work, and I found a new job, which is pretty remarkable, actually, and kind of ironic. I'm the medical director for a company in the state of Maryland that provides medical care to prisons and jails. So I'm actually take that very seriously, and I'm very proud of the work that I do, because a lot of these people, for lack of a better way to say this, just get crapped on by everybody. And it's amazing when I walk down the hallway, you see inmates and you say, good morning, how are you? But nobody treats them like that. They treat them like criminals. And it makes me feel good to know that I'm actually doing something good for people. The prosecutors, again, will lie and cheat and steal and do whatever they have to do to win. And I feel like when I talk to people, I'm wearing a tin hat, I'm insane. But this is reality. This is real. This is my life. Everybody else has told these stories, and you'd think this was fiction. You'd think somebody was writing them. Dan Brown was writing a book or something. But this is real life. So we actually filed with the Supreme Court of the United States because I'm not going to take this laying down, and I'm just like, you know what? We're going to fight back as much as I possibly can. And we're waiting to hear whether they're going to take the case or not. 99% of the time they don't take the case, so not holding out all the hope in the world. But I am trying to work with the Trump administration to get them to just go away and drop the charges, because it's such a ridiculous case. I mean, they charged him with 5 counts. We saw over 100,000 patients, just to put this into perspective, in the time frame of the indictment, over 100,000, and they looked at 5 charts. They never even had a professional coder look at the 5 charts. It was just a government attorney. it's unbelievable, it's insane. So, you know, Cynthia, thank you for doing all this, thank you for putting this together. John, thank you. This is so important because this ruins people's lives. You've heard it from everybody else. You know, this weaponization, these people have no soul, they have no conscience, they don't care who they step on and who they destroy, and whose families they step on and destroy. These are evil people, and there's no other way to say it. They're evil, and we need to stop it. So thank you all very, very much.
Well, it's been a great day. Obviously, we've shared a lot. We've commiserated about a lot of the things that we've been going through over the last 4 years, 5 years. It's unbelievable. But obviously, it's the work of Weaponization Watch, Patriot Freedom Project, obviously, getting that started. That is on the forefront of getting ourselves back on track and getting our country back on track. So these stories are crazy. That story is unbelievable. And it's just people who do everything right, and then they end up losing it all because of just heinous, you said, soulless people. So I want to bring up Cynthia Hughes to close us out today of what's been, I thought, a very, very informative, insightful, and collaborative panel here. Cynthia, why don't you come on up?
Thank you, Mike. Mike Crispy, such a great friend of mine, and he's always here for me and never refused me. There's not a time that I haven't asked him to help me with my events that he doesn't come through for me, and I really am very appreciative of you, Mike. Thank you. I have all these thank yous to give, and I always worry that I leave people out. And without getting into a whole big thing, there are just two people I want to mention, and then we're going to close real quick. But I did want to say a very big thank you to somebody. So, as you heard Marcus talk before, we met because of Doug Mackey about 6 months ago, and Doug and I became fast friends very quickly, and so now when Doug, here's the story, he connects, he does all this connecting, and so we owe Doug a big thank you for that. But I want to tell you how important people of One Taste are. Some things are not easy to defend, right? Like my nephew Tim. And some people are not easy to defend, but you can't be in this space and doing this work and only pick and choose. If you're gonna defend weaponization, then you have to defend weaponization, no matter where it comes from. And what's happening to Rachel and Nicole is a very, very big form of weaponization. What's happening to the young man in this room is a very big form of weaponization. What's happening to my friend's son, what's happened to Mike McMahon, what's happening to our military, what's happening to our president is just giant examples of weaponization, But I do have to give a thank you to the people of One Taste. Because I have put on several events since they have been in my life these last 6 months, and I have to tell you, I haven't had to lift a finger since this event was being put together for me here in New York. They knew that I didn't live close by, they knew that I had other things going on, they knew that I had some personal stuff going on, and without hesitation, they don't ask questions, they don't say anything, they say, what do you need and how can I help? And that's the kind of people I want to be around. Whether I agree with the practice of One Taste is one thing, whether I don't, and I'm sorry to say that. But what I want to say is that there are 2 women that are languishing behind bars this very, very moment because a female judge doesn't like them. And that's the only reason that these women are in jail. Wouldn't you agree, John? It's my opinion, not anybody else's in this room, but my opinion, and I feel very strongly about that. And I feel like maybe the female judge, she should go and join One Taste. In any event, Marcus, Anjali, my sweetheart Karen, Chelsea, I cannot remember the other two girls, please forgive me, but the entire group of One Taste. I cannot do these events without you. I cannot do these events without you ever again. I am truly grateful for your presence in my life and your friendship. Your team is the most amazing people, and I cannot stress it and say it enough. And I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you. I have some great sponsors sponsoring this event and a little dinner afterwards, and I am very grateful to Colonel Manis and my good friend in this room that I'm not allowed to say his name, to my great friend John Schlafly, to the people that support us, to my dear friend Tom Kniff, Nick Smith. The list is long. And Weaponization Watch has to continue. And it continues by doing this and having people like you come out and enduring 4 hours and listening to these stories, because when you leave here, you're gonna go, wow, and you're gonna go talk to people and you're gonna spread the message and you're gonna share the videos and you're gonna follow us all on Twitter and you're gonna help us continue the mission. And I really need you to do that. And so, with that being said, oh, and can we all say happy birthday to my baby cousin Vincent? My sweetheart. Okay, so now that you've heard these conversations, the stories and the truths the mainstream media will not tell you, I hope you will stand with us. I ask you to share this mission with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your church, and everyone who will listen. Help us spread the truth about why Weaponization Watch exists and why this fight matters. And most importantly, I ask that you support this mission however you can, through your voice, through your prayers, your donations, so that together we can continue to shine light where others refuse. Thank you for coming.